Hey everyone, it's Monday. We're sort of still here. You're not. Either are we really. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hey everyone, happy Monday morning. It's Alan Schimmel for Techstrong and Techstrong Gang. We are wrapping, if you couldn't tell, we're still here in Salt Lake City. It's a little quiet out on the floor here. It's the last day of KubeCon, and we're giving you our wrap up as Techstrong Gang today. By the time you watch this, God willing, we'll all be back home. I'll be in a warmer climate and enjoying the sun. Not so for you, Mitchell. Oh no, you might enjoy the sun. It's sunny in Colorado.
That's a little bit, it changes all the time, Colorado.
Yeah,
I looked at the weather report, but I don't think
let's face it, a lot of people in Colorado are very high.
It is high.
And they can't even look at they don't read the weather report.
I'll be in Las Vegas this week.
Actually, you're going to be in Las Vegas. That's
I'm
right.
in Las Vegas, actually.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
So there you
we're
go.
at the
So you're
same-
both-
we're both at OpenText World.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. So if you're at OpenText World, look for these two guys. If you don't know them, the guy here on my right, Mike Vizard, Chief Content Officer, Techstrong Gang member, and here on my left, Mitch Ashley, CTO, Futurum VP Analyst, and as they said, they'll both be at OpenText. So looking at this week, guys, we've done some wrap-ups on our thoughts on KubeCon and what with some of the trends. But there was one thing in particular, Mike, that you brought up, and it didn't that you brought it up. It was like the lead-off thing from Jim Zemlin on the keynote stage. No, it wasn't Jim. It was Chris. Wasn't it Chris?
No, it was Jim.
It was Jim?
Yeah.
Patent trolls.
Yeah.
And, it kind of struck you. Tell us.
It surprised me. I'm not sure it was a conversation that resonated with the audience, but the fact that they let off the conference, suggests that where there's perhaps a little smoke, there's some fire going on here. The issue seems to be that a lot of the contributions that go into these projects, maybe we didn't vet that closely, and somebody did have a patent for this, and the trolls are now making some claims. And the CNCF is looking for some help from the community to identify prior art that will invalidate some of those patents, because they may be a patent that somebody acquired. These trolls go out and get a patent, and they don't really care that much of whether the patent is actually valid. They're just trying to extort some money. But you're the legal eagle. You know how this works.
Yeah. No, if it was up to me, I'd have capital punishment for patent trolls. I'd give them one warning of 15 to 25. And then after that, an injection. Well, what hand did you type with? Which fingers did you type with? Right. But, let's look at it. You mentioned a few things there about prior use, term of art, and stuff like that. The deal with patent trolls is typically they are the classic nuisance. They want to charge you just enough or just not enough where it's worth your while to go to court and call them on it and make them fight.
It's the go-away payment.
Right. It's the nuisance payment. And the question is, how much is a nuisance worth? And for bigger companies, nuisances might be more money than for smaller companies. But many smaller companies are not set up. They don't have in-house counsel. They're not going to go fight these things. And if it's 5, 10, 20 grand, they'll pay it and move on. The idea with these patent trolls, they come in two flavors. There's some patent trolls who actually see something that's not been patented, and they actually put in the time and effort to get a patent out of our patent office for a particular, thing to do, for a particular patentable type of function or what have you. That could take 2 to 5 years, and it's rather expensive. And
then they go and enforce it once they've
right,
got
and then we go enforce it. Then there are just patent troll farms who go out and buy patents that haven't been enforced in a while, but are still valid, and then go out and enforce these patents they buy. And those are the real patent trolls that, quite frankly, chopping off a few fingers isn't justice. A 22 to the back of the head would be fine. But that being said, what you'll find in most of these patents, who's to blame? The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Because they're an overworked, underpaid entity in the bowels of some government building somewhere. And what do they know about the finer points of WebAssembly language or Kubernetes and container management? People submit patents. They look if anyone else has a similar patent. They don't have the time to do the due diligence, even though it takes years to get a patent. And then they grant people a patent that probably is not valid if you look at prior use and stuff like that. And off these folks go to the, playing the lottery of our legal system and nuisance.
There's a key word we haven't used yet, which is prior art. It's not black and white of, is this the same thing as that? It's like in music, right? Did you rip off the song to write your song? Well, every song's got 4 chords and, in the Lord or whatever, every country song. So it's there's lots of shades of gray, which is where they operate in, where they think they can claim there's gray.
Look, the fact of the matter is, I think the overwhelming majority of the patent claims would fail if you actually took it to trial.
You went through the process.
But they count on you doing the nuisance thing. And, you look around, again, we spoke about it yesterday, there's 150, 200 small stands here up and down this whole thing. How many of these companies are going to pay an attorney $50,000 or more to go to trial, $100,000 to go to trial, when they could buy out for $10,000 or $15,000? And that's what these trolls count on.
I didn't see the main stage conversation with Jim, but he talked at the analyst press event, talked about the same thing. What I heard the 2 strong messages were, one, validation, we've arrived. Unfortunately, this is a form of showing that we've arrived if they're coming after us. The other is that Linux Foundation, CNCF, will stand behind it. We're going to fight it. We're not going to roll over on this stuff. And so we're putting these programs and all the things together. Yeah. But it was kind of a little bit of a badge of honor that, don't want to have to deal with this, but this says that we're doing some good things here.
All good intentions aside there, I'm looking at this going, let me get this straight. So you're going to give somebody a T-shirt because they helped you thwart $1 billion lawsuit. I think maybe the reward system's not quite
kind of like a bug bounty. No, but you want to know, look, all right, so that's setting a dial. But the idea of banding together, right, this is like the cyber insurance company saying don't pay the ransomware, right? The idea of banding together these companies, and when the patent troll comes for one, you come for all of us. And we're going to band together and hire an attorney or law firms that just deal with this crap, and we're paying them anyway. So you want to go to war, you better bring lawyers, guns, and money.
A flavor of NATO, right?
Yeah, and banding together a community.
Yeah.
Of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of users who can cite prior use, which, make no mistake, is the kryptonite of these patent trolls.
So aren't we exploiting a legal system here that makes it just too expensive to litigate, and now we're just paying?
So let me tell you what the answer there is. And unfortunately, our courts don't have the cojones to do what needs to be done. I would make them take me to court on the patent litigation, and I would ask for punitive damages, legal fees, time and expense if the patent troll loses. So you want a patent troll? Let's put some skin in the game and watch these guys fold up like the cheap suits they are and crawl back under the rocks they come from.
Okay.
What can be done to make the patent office better?
Money and resources. I mean, these aren't patent attorneys. First of all, there was a time, Thomas Edison time, where you didn't have to be a nuclear scientist. There weren't too many nuclear scientists in that.
Probably
there
not.
was. There was Niels Bohr, those Rutherford, those guys. But back then, you didn't have to necessarily be such a specialist in any given discipline to understand what these patents were about. But today, I mean, if you're not a cloud native expert, if you don't understand how a microservices architecture works, or the underpinnings of how modern routing tables work, and all, name it.
How do you know it's new? It's not been seen before.
You don't know. You don't even know. I mean, it might as well be written in Chinese or Greek. So part of it is getting people, specialists in the patent office who work on patterns in specific areas. That takes money.
What, you don't think those people are available for, $80,000 a year job, 20 years in, retirement, government salary? I mean, come on, what's the matter with that?
No. No. I mean, I no.
I mean, are we going to overhaul the patent system? I doubt it, no.
Well, look, this was something like Brad Feld. This was near and dear to him for years,
and
right?
For a while, companies said,
I'm not going to do away with
patents,
right? That companies shouldn't do patents.
I have an answer.
What's your answer?
My answer is to put all the patents in the big giant LLM, and then that makes it easier to find which patents are actually similar, and perhaps we can use that technology to help us fight this fight.
As long as it doesn't hallucinate.
Yeah, but so that'll take care of 10%. Because most times, it's not the troll who comes after you is not saying your patent is invalid, my patent is older than your patent. No. You don't have a patent. I do. That's the majority of the cases. So an LLM of all the patents would not help you in that case because you're not a patent holder.
Well, also, how much of it is really about the patent? How much of it is about the threat of lawsuit, money?
Right.
There's that.
It's the game of chicken.
It's exactly what it is. At some point, it becomes really about the patent, but at the beginning, it's not.
I think you could have all the patents in an LLM, and then you could have a massive database of software, especially if the CNCF owns the code for all these things, and just compare the two, and then you could just start invalidating patents.
Have you ever read
principle.
patents?
Yeah.
I don't even think AI could take a patent and match it to how a project is being used.
It's a very specific way they're written.
Yeah, they're so. It's,
our friend Louis wrote how many patents?
Yes.
IBM and VMware and how many?
They're so obscurely written and hazed it's just impossible to do. It's impossible.
I think it's worth the research effort, and I think the CNCF and the Linux Foundation should go fund that thing with all their various vendor partners.
A better thing might be to, and I've seen this, bandied about over the years, is have something like, a first use library, if you will, right? For every patent that's out there, have a committee that hunts out first use. And if you could document that first use prior to the issuance of the patent, you have two choices. You could go have an in-house law firm that then goes to have that patent invalidated, or just wait for the patent troll, to come out from behind the rack and play whack-a-mole.
I don't think the Linux Foundation's business is solving the patent problem. I mean,
well, when
like
you
anybody, you're going to contain it, right? And you have the risk of something really does happen that is deemed violation and goes to court or whatever, and then there's bigger risk to it. But it's a risk you manage and a cost, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you get to the point where people won't use open source software because too many people are having to pay or going to court, that's a different issue. But I don't think you overreact. Don't over-rotate it on it yet.
Do we need to be more circumspect about the code that we do contribute to these open source projects? Because a lot of times people are, they're enthusiastic, but they're not legal eagles, and they're not checking to see whether or not this thing that they've created is actually violating some patent.
Well, they may have taken an idea they did at work and said, I'm going to kind of use that same idea here in my open source project, and it's okay. It's open source, right? So.
So now you're talking about something differently, right? This is where there's a valid patent, and are people entitled to be compensated for their patent? Yeah, that's okay. But I don't think that's a majority of these cases. I don't even think decent minority. I think that's a sliver.
Oh, isn't it a rare exception?
Right,
One
it's
of
a
these
sliver,
really goes
a
to-
sliver.
especially at big companies. I mean, it's also the size of who they're going after. You know, if they're going after Comcast or IBM or Apple, they're going to get the world thrown at them, and
Right.
you know, like, yeah, I can outlast you, patent troll.
No, yeah,
they're
the
going
patent
after,
troll.
you know, are the 3amigos.com, and you know, we're, you know, like, okay, please don't put us out of business, right?
Right.
Right.
And it's the 3amigos.com who like, hey, my business is getting customers to use my software widget.
Yeah,
I don't have time to play the legal Eagle Beagle game.
exactly.
This sounds like a form of ambulance chasing.
It is. Oh, it absolutely is.
Let me just tell you something. On the rung of legal trash, ambulance chasing is way above the patent trolls. I'll just say that. Ambulance chases serve a purpose in society. I'm not sure what that purpose is, but they're certainly above the lowly patent troll.
I think it's to keep our insurance rates higher. That's what I figured.
I'm going to pull a Guy Curry. What are we talking about?
Well, we came back to it. Ambulance chasing. Look, what they do, it's not to keep your
happened
insurance
the other
rates
day.
high. It's not to keep your insurance rates high. If it wasn't for the ambulance chases, we wouldn't have safe products. We wouldn't have seatbelts in cars or airbags. Or we wouldn't have all these defective
Be
child
driving Ford
toys.
Pintos and
Yeah, we'd be driving Pintos and Gremlins. I like the Gremlin. You like
Corsair.
The Gremlin?
Remember, I was
The
in that
Corsair
film?
would be nice.
We got gremlins and trolls now. This is good.
That's pretty darn good. Pretty darn good. All right. Last thoughts on CubeCon, fellas?
I enjoy this show, and I keep coming back because there's things to learn here, and it is one of the best places where some of the best minds in this business are here and for 3 days, and that's joy. And so I would recommend everybody to come to, you know, CubeCon. I mean, you know, I know you want to have it restructured, but
Yeah.
it's still the best show in town.
There is an attraction. Yeah, the people want to be part of something. They come. They don't go because their boss sent them. Right?
No,
they came
no,
'cause
this
they
is
wanna-
still a high buzz event.
Yeah, it totally is. They want to be part of the community. There's a community to it. I think for me, for us, it's a great place to get a kind of a center of gravity is happening for a little while, and you kind of see where things are going, what people are thinking. You know, and some shows you don't get that. It's just
No.
kind of a vendor community, and nothing wrong with that. But you don't hear necessarily where people are trying to go with their products or the market, et cetera. Here you get a really strong sense of what's happening.
Yeah.
So
The-
I love it.
It is a fire hose, though, right? You come
Oh,
here
absolutely.
and there's just so much tech running around. Whereas when you go to a single vendor show, you know, it's usually within a finite set of tech that you're dealing with. But here,
Yeah.
man, it's quite like you're bouncing from one thing to the next, and it's just like, holy crap.
Yep.
Agreed.
Agreed. How about you?
Agreed. I love it. I think it's still a high energy show. I just wish they'd make it a little more user friendly.
Lower
Is
altitude.
that too much to ask?
So, you know,
No, I don't mind
pass the
being
coal.
high.
You always got to go there. You always got.
You always got to go there.
All right.
We tried to do an Andy Weiner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Always got to pick on me.
As the bartender says,
Last call.
last call. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay
Stay
here.
here. We'll see you in London at the next CubeCon. This is Alan Schimmel on behalf of Mitch Ashley, Mike Vizard. We hope you've enjoyed our CubeCon coverage. We got a full day of Techstrong TV coming at you, as well as we'll probably be live at Open Text. Right? We are sending a video crew, so stay tuned for that all this week. But for now, we're out of here, everyone. Take care.
is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back here to Techstrong TV. I am really happy to introduce you to our next guest. Her name is Jenna Chamra. Jenna is the Chief Customer Officer at a company called Provoke Solutions. Jenna, welcome to Techstrong TV. It's great to have you on here.
Thanks, Alan. Great to be on here as well.
So you're Chief Customer Officer, and Chief Customer Officer can mean a lot of things, right? For some people, I'm the head salesperson. For other people, I'm about customer success and, making sure customers have a good experience. It can mean other things as well. But before we jump into, what your present role and job is as Chief Customer Officer, let's hear a little bit about your background, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I, for a leader in IT, I probably come from a pretty interesting background. My background actually started as a designer in a digital agency. So I spent the first 5 to 6 years of my career designing really great user experiences for some of the top brands in the world. And quickly realized, though, that a lot of those brands, a lot of those, whether that was PowerPoint or prototypes or whatever, never actually saw the light of day. And why was that? Because they were actually getting them executed was really hard. And we had one big project and, it was supposed to be the first responsive web design to hit the market. And by the time I actually hit the market, it was 3 years and the design was out of date. And I was frustrated, right? Why does it take so long to get these ideas actually into the hands of end users? And so I switched gears. I went to mobile startup. I fell in love with the power of small cross-functional teams, the ability to deliver agile at speed. But then Miss Enterprise, found myself with our current CEO at Provoke, Andy Lang, recruited me on and said, no, I can pair you with some really good engineers and we can actually get this done at Enterprise. And, we went on that journey and it was really fun. And I think we started to see what we call now product teams can do at enterprises and how they can start to deliver value and how we can get into iterative software development. But in the end, it still wasn't enough, right? And you're still delivering, but there was still this blocker. Why is this taking so long? And the fact of the matter is, enterprise has a whole bunch of technical debt. And that technical debt makes it really hard for them to innovate, unlike a startup. And so, for the past 3 years, we've been on this mission on how do we really start to remove that blocker. And in the end, I think whether I was a designer, a user experience, a product person, now, CCO, it is all about how can we deliver value to our clients faster? And by delivering value, I mean, how do we actually enhance the experiences of their customers and their employees? And that's really my goal. I love solving those challenging problems. I love trying to figure out how you can actually, start to reinvent how people work and how people interact with your brand.
I love it. So that's a great job too. Right? I mean, it is. That is something I could sink my teeth into as well. Let's talk a little bit about Provoke Solutions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so Provoke Solution is a global tech-enabled services company. We've been around for 23 years or so, and in the end, I think we're really the pioneer of emerging technologies. And so, when we first started, that was more helping clients, move from on-prem to cloud. We went through several iterations of, what that looked like over the past couple of years, helping customers with new technologies like blockchain, which we all know kind of had some hangups along the way. But in the end, about 2.5, 3 years ago, we really knew that AI, and specifically Gen AI, was going to change the way that we worked and the way that we just interact in general. And so we made a pretty big pivot then to really help us in the way that we work, help to leverage Gen AI to change the way that we work, to really leverage it to do and accelerate some of those real big blockers for enterprise, and also help with our clients on how to start to see the value of it. I know everybody's kind of commenting on AI, isn't it really delivering value or not, right? And in the end, we as a company do see it deliver significant value if you can find the right use case to fit. And with our technology, which we call Nova, It is a patent pending technology that we are actually enabling our teams and our clients' teams with what we're calling digital coworkers. And what that means is that all those kind of mundane, soul-sucking tasks that used to have to do as far as software development, we're just assigning that now to a digital coworker, letting our developers focus on what they truly love, which is more new feature development, right? They don't love to work on the mundane problems of the past, upgrading legacy systems, test automation, all that stuff is not really what people love to work on. They like to work on the what's next, right? And so by enabling this new kind of hybrid workforce, we're really helping customers move forward faster, but also driving higher satisfaction within product teams.
I love it. Let developers develop, right?
Yeah.
Let people do. And that's really what it's kind of about. Obviously here at Techstrong, we spend a lot of our time talking about AI. Everyone does, it seems, I think. But really, its effect on the developers of the world, on app dev, on DevOps, right? And these kinds of things. And, one of the things I always like to tell people is, look, they say there's about 27 million developers in the world today, give or take. And we thought maybe we'd go up to 30 or 35 by 2035. But with AI, we're liable to have a 500 million developers, right? They may not be developers in your view of what a developer is today. But when you have AI, everyone could develop. You could just tell it what you want and it'll develop. It writes the app for you. And that makes you a developer at some level. Maybe want to call them citizen developer, whatever you want, non-professional. So it's going to have that wow effect of expanding the base of developers and people who develop apps. But at the same time, for that cadre of professional developers, right? The skills, if they could master AI, their productivity, the things they could do, the time they could do it, as you mentioned, getting rid of the mundane, soul-sucking kind of stuff, focusing on things that are really cool or exciting or, that you want to work on. Sky's the limit. When you look at it, that wow, right? It's wow. What are these kind of new skills that you think that the professional developers need to master in this new age? And what about the non-professional, the so-called citizen developers? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my mic here. What do they need to kind of get their arms wrapped around it to participate?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we need to come at this technology with a growth mindset. And what do I mean by that is it is not perfect now. It is not, right? We have a long ways to go in terms of the maturity of the technology and how it's used and the best use cases for it. But in the end, you had to learn, right? And so you have to embrace that it is a moving technology and that's shifting, just like cloud was, right? Just like when the iPhone first came out, none of us knew how to design a mobile app, right? There is a learning curve to get over. But in the end, what developers and I think what we're enabling our teams is start to use it. Start to understand what it's good at, what it's not good at, right? But keep using it, right? I think too often, and I think we see this with a lot of the Copilot technologies, is that there's high usage for about a month, and then it completely drops off, right? Because people get frustrated with it, and so it is about how do you keep learning and figuring out what's working and what's not, and how do you create a community within your organization to talk about, oh, it's really good for unit tests. Hey, did you try this? What we're seeing with, just simple accelerators like GitHub Copilot is that, actually you would think it would be really helpful for a junior developer. It's actually hard for a junior developer because they don't know the correct prompts to give it good outputs. For a mid and senior developer, right, it is a really big accelerator. So I think the core thing is we still need to give our entry-level developers foundations, right? You can't just expect them to now you have GPT and you're going to be a great developer. They need that strong foundational level. That's they'll understand how to prompt and how to interact with the technology it is. And then for our seniors and and the continuing developers, it's how do their roles change, right? Because in the end, there is a whole bunch of work that they used to do, that all of our developers used to do, that can be done by AI now, right? And what does that mean? It should be freeing, right? But it is kind of scary, right? Because all this work that you used to have on your plate, well, AI can do that in minutes. It used to take me hours and days. Is that going to come at my job? It's scary, right? But in the end, if you can use it as this is an enabler, this is going to help me accelerate, and this is actually going to help us get to farther on a roadmap. Which in the end, if you're ever, when we're in sprint demos and you're in sprints with business owners, the most frustrating thing is, why am I not seeing more? Like, how did it take this long to just make these edits on the page? It's because there was all these mundane tasks that had to get done in the background to actually make that work, to actually make that fully functional end to end. And that's how AI, I think, can really, really accelerate things. And I think, the skills we need to embrace is really embracing that your job is going to change. Right. Embracing how you can leverage these tools, being a little patient, being willing to continue to try. Some tools are going to work good. Some tools are not, right? We've honed in on, how we actually start to look at it with our, Nova technology. It's how do we not change the way we work today? Because that's really hard. When you're saying, oh, now you had to learn this whole new UI for using generative AI and you had to remember to prompt it, that's really hard, right? If you can just say, oh, listen, okay, now I just have a new team member on my team. I'm just going to sign that task to them, right? That becomes more seamless, right? And that's how we start to think that we get how we feel like we're getting better adoption. But in the end, I think it does really come down to mindset. You have to be excited about how this technology is going to change your job and create a new job in the future. I kind of look back at when I was a designer, right? We had Photoshop and we would slice every asset. We would QA every single spec for the dev team, right? And that was my whole job. That job doesn't exist anymore, right? We have Figma, one file that you can mock, you can prototype within minutes, and it has the dev specs for development. You just hand it off, right? There is a lot of amazing things that has come from that technology to just allow designers to think through multiple iterations, to prototype, to get more usability feedback quicker on. The same for development. They haven't had this huge breakthrough in tools that are going to take away a whole bunch of that mundane, just not fun tasks. That's what AI can do and enable. But it is about enabling workforce to embrace that their jobs are going to change and, have the right foundations to be able to start to leverage prompts and leverage, this is a skill set that we should be leveraging AI for. And knowing that all those things that we used to do, like upgrading a React, system from 10 to 11, we know how to do that more. Great. What can we do? Right. But it is a shift in mindset overall.
Love it. It is. I think it starts with the mindset.
Yep.
And then from there, you got to really go look at all of the different tools. We do this Techstrong gang every morning, Monday to Friday here. And we spend 45 minutes talking about, there's always 3 blocks to every show. The AI is just touch an oxygen sucker. It's usually 2 out of the 3 blocks, if not 3.
Yeah.
And we were just talking the other day kind of about this, right? For those people, and there are people out there, I'm sure you run into them, who are resisting using AI and AI tools because, they're purist or whatever, right? It doesn't do as good a job. But,
Yeah.
they're going to get left behind because the people who do adopt these things are just going to, race out ahead of them.
Yeah, it is, you are with AI, your ability to kind of make yourself a unicorn is powerful, right? And I do get scared for the people who are not willing to embrace it. I do think that they are going to become the dinosaurs of development. And it's going to be hard for them to, really keep up. Right. Because I do believe that with this technology, if you're allowing yourself to use it and leverage it, your productivity, your outputs can be 10x. And then creativity in your mindset, once you're free from a lot of that stuff, allows you to break through so much more than what we've been able to do in the past. And it's just and then the question becomes, where do we reshift that time and energy, and what can you really achieve with that? Like, that's the most exciting part of this all.
Sure is.
Is how can you redefine how you work and what you're able to produce and deliver.
Another topic we just discussed today earlier, it's actually it'll be on tomorrow's show, through the magic of video, right?
Yeah.
Is this whole concept of agentic AI, right? Agents, AI agents that do work for you. And, you may need an agent for your agents, if you will. But like some of the tasks you were talking about, tell an agent, go out to Photoshop, take this picture, give me 5 slices of it in different tones and formats and whatever dimensions. And add this to that one and take that one away from this one and just go do it and deliver it. I mean, the idea of just being like to have not a digital twin, but what'd you call them? A digital coworker.
A digital coworker, yeah. We have agents or digital coworkers right now doing test automation. So developers test, you assign it to, what we call Nolan, who is another digital coworker, an agent. And within minutes, Nolan has completed the automated test and you're ready to go, right? Before, right, automated test or getting testing done was a blocker to completing a sprint, right? It was, have the testing done. We can't claim the definition of done. We can't actually show that to the business owner because it hasn't been tested. Right now, that's all changed because all you have to do is say, "Oh, I'm done. No, I'll go test." And with 3 minutes, it's good, or actually, there's some bugs and I had to go back and fix this. Right?
What a game changer!
Yeah, right. It is, and let's face it, no hardcore engineers love writing automated test scripts, right? And so. If we can take that and let them focus on, new feature development, they're all super happy.
Yeah. I agree. Jenna, I don't know if we mentioned the Provoke Solutions website.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have kind of 2 websites right now. So you can go to provokesolutions.com to check out kind of our 4 tech-enabled services. And then you can go to nova.ai, which is really what we call our... Yep.
Can you spell that for us?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's KNOVVA.ai. And Nova is our IP. It's our kind of platform of digital coworkers, specializing from test automation to actually reverse engineering business requirements. So a lot of fun and exciting things I think to check out there as well.
Very cool. Jenna, thank you so much for coming on and educating us a little bit. It sounds like Provoke Solutions is really out ahead on this. As you said in the beginning, Provoke Solution brings emerging technologies.
Yeah, we love being at the forefront of this stuff. We believe this is going to be a game changer. So it's super fun to be kind of leading this new forefront of how we'll work.
Very cool. Keep it up. Come back and keep us posted, okay?
All right, will do. Thanks, Alan.
All righty. Jenna Chamra, Chief Customer Officer of Provoke Solutions here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be back. Stay tuned.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back here to Techstrong TV. I'm happy to introduce you to our next guest on Techstrong TV today. His name is Mike Leiborg. Mike is the CISO at a company called Swimlane. Let's welcome him. Hey, Mike, welcome to Techstrong TV. It's great to have you on here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Alan.
Okay. So, Mike, I said you were the CISO at Swimlane. And, there, as I was talking to you off camera, there's CISOs and there's CISOs. There's first-time CISOs. There's long-time security admins who become CISO. There's all different flavors. Looking at you, I can't tell what flavor you are. Tell us a little bit about your adventure on the way to becoming CISO at Swimlane here.
Yeah, no, I've been with Swimlane for 7 years. Kind of worked my way up from a consultant, so cybersecurity consultancy and enablement, right, from our customer experience programs. Prior to that, I built a couple of security programs in SOCs, so very tactical, operationally focused on how do we manage risk, right? And way before then, spent about 12 plus years at the United States Marine Corps. And some of those are USOCOM under umbrella called the Marine Special Operations Command, where it was really interesting because it was a bridge between kinetic and technical solutions to deal with our different mission profiles.
Got it. It's an interesting background. Very, very cool.
Yeah. I mean, I can even add before that, right? Like I did IT. So remember the good old days in the 90s of just network security, right? Like the early days of Cisco.
That's how I got
OSH and
started
switching.
too.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of us, I tell people that, especially today, because you get like a lot of kids come in, they take cybersecurity in school today, right?
Yeah.
They didn't have it then. First of all, we didn't call it cybersecurity. It was InfoSec or security. But most of the people I know, they came into security by way of being network people, right? They were playing with routers and switches and stuff like that. And security was kind of part of that, or they didn't know enough not to do it. And they got drafted into it. So good story. Swim lane. I think some of our audience is probably somewhat familiar, at least with swim lane. But for those who aren't, Mike, how would you describe swim lane to them?
Yeah, I mean, the one sentence is we're an AI-enabled automation orchestration platform, right? Like you can definitely learn more by going to swimlane.com. But holistically, if we go back years and you think about what I used to do as a security operations center manager or doing forensics, right, is we did a lot of repetitive work. So day in, day out, we would go and collect evidence or analyze data sets to kind of find anomalies, so those needles in the haystack. So we got smarter and we started building bash script, PowerShell scripts, Python scripts to do all of this in volume and kind of standardize. When I started at Swimlane, it kind of mind blown because we put that into a platform where we could take all these kind of high code to low code transformations and run these on cron jobs, run them on actions. If the detection signal comes in, then go and run these 100 different tasks, right? So humans don't have to do it. And it kind of standardizes and enables the security analyst teams and the risk managers to get a normalized data set of what's actually going on without having to go and query and do all these lookups. So unifying all the information. That is at a very high level what we do at Swimlane as a product platform team and also internally.
Sure. So, as I suspected, Mike, Swimlane wasn't always an AI security vendor because 7-8 years ago, there were no AI security vendors. Let's be real. But, sir, today, not just today, over the last year or 2 years, it's very hard to have any discussion around technology, IT, security without AI and AI, how AI influences it. You've come up with your own little checklist, right? 8 must ask questions that you should ask your AI security vendor. This is something people out here want to hear. Before we start, is there anywhere like a blog or somewhere on Swimlane where, because they may not remember all 8, somewhere where they can get this, you think? And then let's jump into what these 8 must-ask questions are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so it's front center on our homepage.
Okay.
If you just click on, so you go to swimlane.com and you look up our Hero AI. There's several blogs, videos, and even interactive demos, right? We can kind of walk through the user experience to see what we do with it. As far as all the different questions, I think the questions obviously change every day, right? And to your point, when we look back on where AI was at, maybe even 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it wasn't always returning the same kind of, or the expected response, right? So we might know the answer and you go and ask it. So if you're not seeing what you are expecting to, or you already know what's true, that kind of gave a lot of people a bad taste, right? So I think one of the first questions I always ask I'd suggest everybody should ask is like, what model are you currently using? And how are you training it? And what was it built on? And how is it public and private? Like we can dig deeper on any of these, but that's often one of the first things that I ask our vendors in our ecosystem.
Absolutely. So, all right, let's jump into it. What are these 8 must-ask questions?
Well, data sources is often really important, right? Like how are we training it? What are we doing with it? How are you ensuring data privacy? So I just mentioned something earlier,
Yeah.
right? If it's public, so one of the big things that we often see when people go on stage and they talk about AI is like, well, how are you controlling and reducing the risk of possibly hallucinations or returning information that could have been erroneously submitted by a human that shouldn't have updated or trained the model to, right? So what we did internally here at Swimlane is we built a kind of like, it's not a public model where anybody can go in and ask whatever they want. It's specifically built and focused on cybersecurity, technologies, answers, and problems. So I think that's really crucial on the
Sure.
LLM selection.
Yeah, I agree. Give us some more.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about data sources, the models, algorithms. So there's a lot to dig deeper there, right? But at the end of the day, it has to be safe, responsible use. And I think also like looking at knowing and testing and providing guardrails is extremely important. And that's something I often ask our vendors. And I think a lot of times, let's say that you build a policy as a CISO or as a risk management team, right? You then start looking at, well, what are we doing to protect our sensitive information? Because humans are humans. They're always going to take the easy path, right? So I always recommend that, well, don't give everybody access to your sensitive information because then they can't submit it into a public or open model, right? Where it could be compromised possibly later. So always take care of the basics first. If you have a good solid foundation, then you've immediately also reduced a lot of the risk.
Sure do. That's a good one. How about another?
Measures, adversarial attacks, right? I don't think we have all the answers yet. But internally, and as a consumer of other models, test it, see what you can break, throw problems out there, and then figure out, what are the vulnerabilities. I think that's really paramount. And as we continue to learn more about different areas where there could be exploits, or maybe we see something on the in the news flash that some other model just got compromised, and here's how they were able to get information out. Test it against your own vendors' ecosystems and see what the response is. And if you find something, say something, right? Report it back to those vendors.
It's a good one for sure. That goes back to, again, the security people. When I first got involved in security, one of the reasons they got into security was they like breaking things and then fixing them and make them better.
Yeah.
Right? Make sure they're not as easily breakable. So, that harks back to what security people are about. And I think that just doesn't go for AI security tools, right? I think that goes for all the tools that you use, and it's at the core of being a security person. But good stuff. What about halfway through? Let's hear some more.
Yeah, I think also the level of support, right? So what's the frequency of their training? What is their training data? And if you do have a customer or user report something, like what does that process look like? Hey, we found something, we've now said something. How long does it take for you to fix this? Is this something you do once a year, or is it continuous, right? So that should be part of your question stack as well. And I think the focus. So if we go back to the start, just because the tool in your stack has AI enabled doesn't make it necessarily better. Keep in mind that some early adopters failed pretty hard when they started shipping AI. And so they didn't ask the simple question, so what? What how is this helping us? How is it helping our customers? What outcomes does it deliver? And how can you measure and show me and quantify and qualify the data that is being returned? Um, and so rather than boil in the ocean and try to do everything, right? Like our model, like if you ask it what the weather is going to be tomorrow, it's not there for that. So make sure that you kind of pick and select the tools, and that you ask those questions to your vendors in your ecosystem.
Absolutely. I think people, again, people think of AI, they think of ChatGPT, and it has this huge LLM of the entire internet as it existed in 2021 or whatever. But that's not what today's AI tools are about. They actually operate on small language models or much smaller LLMs, right, that are more focused on the job at hand. I think that's a good thing to focus on. What else you got for us, Mike?
I think just compliance, right? Compliance and different regulations, like new regulations are being spawned almost daily or updated. And I think it's important that we all follow along with that, right? So that we can be good stewards of the information that we return to our consumers, but also focus on how do we mitigate? So the whole testing guardrails and everything else. So if you start asking those complex questions that could possibly return sensitive information, make sure that it doesn't. And that should be part of your whole build, test, validation phase for your own adoption, whether that's an internally built or something that you service or something that you consume as well. So be aware of all the frameworks out there, map what you can, and continuously improve and extend your risk management program to include AI. Right? So a good example is people have personal phones, right? So let's say that we are not a nimble organization, or that the companies that we're talking to or about like may not be so nimble. So they're like, yeah, we're just going to block everything. You won't be able to use any of the public LLMs, right, or systems out there. And then they go block that, and then now everybody just starts using personal devices, and now they just extend or expand the risk because now you don't have any visibility into what is being used for, possibly, right? So follow best and common sense practice is what I like to say, or better practice, because I don't think there's a best practice anywhere, but there's definitely things you shouldn't do. So that's really, I think, one of the most important approaches with when it comes to the different standards and regulations. Sorry, it was a long-winded answer, but
no, it's okay. Look, some things can't be said in 5 words, so it's all good. We're getting to the end of our list, though. Why don't you give us what else we got left here?
Yeah, I think embrace it, right? That's a really big focus because it's here whether you like it or not, right? So enable and train. Talk about the different scenarios. I mean, we can laugh about fishing, training, and education because people still get fished, right? But doing something is better than doing nothing. So talk about what's acceptable. Make sure people acknowledge that, and you as a business kind of assume and then transfer the risk where applicable. I think those are really important because building blocks when it comes to AI, and still just take care of the basics first.
I agree with you 100%, man.
Well,
right? You can't spin it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, sir.
I was going to say you can't spin. You can't go 0 to 100 in a day or two, right? You gotta. It's evolutionary, not just plug and play. So, that would be my big thing to folks adopting these things too. Is you got to let it digest, like get your head around it before you try to go 100 miles an hour.
Yeah. Anyway, and it's not linear either, right? Like
no,
the adoption. the expansion, the advancement in general, right? It is awesome for us, I think, to be part of this era. And we can say that every 10 years or so, there's some new technology boom, right? AI doesn't necessarily, it's not new. I mean, it is new in the sense of adoption, but I think, every couple of years, there's a big change, whether it's the internet, right? Like people started using the internet and people are like, oh, this is awesome. And then it kind of tones down a bit. And now it's business as usual, but always build in those controls to mitigate risk throughout, and get deep into it, and test everything. Those are, I think, my biggest internal risk management factors, right? That we focus on heavily. But if you say, yeah, no, we're never going to adopt AI, we don't allow it.
Are you kidding yourself?
Yeah, I think so. And people will find workarounds. So now you'll build mitigating controls for the workarounds, and now you're just spinning your wheels doing unnecessary.
During the course of my career, I've heard that same thing said with open source. We'll never use open source in this company, right? We only use commercial software where we have a throat to choke and an SLA and blah, blah, blah. 99% of all companies today use open source. And I bet you the 1% who said they probably don't realize that it's built into the applications they're using anyway. So the same thing with wireless. I remember once being at an Army base out in Colorado, Fort Carson, big Army base, and a beautiful golf course. And I was talking to the DUM, which is sort of the CISO of an Army base, right? They're the information assurance officer for that Army base. And I asked him what he was doing with wireless security, and he says, we don't do anything with wireless security because we don't allow wireless, And then as he's saying that, I'm seeing people like reach under their desk, unplugging their WAPs, and waiting for them to pass, and they plug it back in. You're not going to stop progress, right? You can't do, you got to embrace it. So
No, absolutely.
Agree with you. Hey, Mike, we're about out of time. I want to thank you for coming on here and giving us this must-ask questions. Again, people can get this off the front page of Swim Lane. Is that swimlane.com?
Yeah, yep, Alan, it is.
Check that out. Mike, don't be a stranger. Come back and keep us posted here on AI and AI security.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan. Thank you for having us today.
My pleasure. Mike Gleiborg, CISO at Swim Lane, talking about 8 must-ask questions for AI security vendors. You're watching Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Techstrong Unplugged. I'm your host, Natan Solomon, and this is episode 30 of our series. In this episode, we're taking you to AI Dev Summit 2024. There, our co-host Cassandra Chen met up with Daniel Bernardi, and they talked about building inclusive developer ecosystems and automating the future. Daniel is the co-founder of Sonans and a former head of developer advocacy at Twitter. He explores the potential of AI to automate processes, reshape industries, and drive innovation. Without further ado, let's head over to AI Dev Summit 2024.
Welcome back to Techstrong Unplugged. My name is Cassandra Chen, and today we're here with Daniela.
Say that right. Hi, everyone.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes. So I'm Daniele, right now the co-founder at Sonans. We are building a marketplace for AI developer tools. And prior to that, I've been at Twitter, where I was heading developer advocacy and community, working with developers and basically building the Twitter developer ecosystem.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about the queer developer ecosystem?
For sure. It's one of the things I was mentioning is how underrepresented the queer community may feel, especially in the developer world. When you go to certain events or conferences, or even when you start your own business, you feel alone towards like a sea of people trying to speak like the same, look like the same. And I think it may feel discouraging at first, but it's actually one of our strengths. I represent the queer community, being queer myself, is to really have that mindset to think different and to really get to understand a problem from a different perspective and to solve it with solutions that are off the beaten path. That's one. I also realized, like, when I go on stage and speak, that I basically represent not just the company or the product, I also represent that cohort of developers there. And so in the way, obviously, I look, in the way I speak, and the way I try to relate to the audience, I try to bring that aspect because I want developers to relate to my experience and vice versa. I think that's a good aspect because in the end, we're like humans and we try to help one another. Myself, as somebody who's worked in developer relations, my job is to really help developers build something amazing and to show them why they should care about building. And so we want to make sure that happens and the message gets across in the most empathetic way possible.
I think that's really special how you're like representing the community when you speak.
Yeah, I can take just as much credit, but when I was at Twitter, for example, I had a fantastic team and those people were bringing their best selves all the time. And that was one of the great things about that team that really wanted to be there with the audience they wanted to represent, work on the exact use cases for which those developers were trying to build solutions for, and just be that use case, be the voice of not just the company, but those developers. And so I actually took inspiration from there. Before I joined, I was nothing like this. And then I realized that this was an advantage, actually. It might feel like you get a ton of weird looks or people look at you in a strange way. But in the end, when you have a voice and you have a platform to speak, then it's obvious that you are approaching things differently. And this actually becomes almost like advertising for yourself. It's your personal brand. And so putting your own identity into the developer relations is actually important. And it really gets you to help other developers feel more part of that community. That's part of, obviously, a business value that really is compatible with getting more audience and getting more engagement. So it's best of both worlds. The company wants you to have more engagement. You want to be yourself to represent as many developers as possible, be more inclusive. The two things are compatible with one another.
It's almost like you turned something you could be scared of into something you're really prideful of.
Absolutely. And I was scared. If you looked at me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where I was again, nothing like this, I had to come out still. So I was this straight guy in a gingham button down, and I wasn't really standing out. But it's as if the content was in there. I just needed to let it out, and I could not, because I thought that in order to deliver the content, I needed to look or appear or act like everybody else. That is not the case. The case is you need to be comfortable with who you are before you jump on stage. I wouldn't be here speaking at conferences if I didn't feel comfortable with myself. And the moment I found that, I also found joy in really telling the message, interacting, and delivering kind of a message value to other developers. So what you say is absolutely right.
I can say now that I'm really happy for you.
Thank you. I hope to be obviously an advocate, not just for myself, but I want to show people that there's no reason in hiding. And so I want to be the best self, so other people can realize that if they also are the best selves, things can go well for everybody. Everybody benefits from this.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to talk about how you got started into technology?
Yes. I started into technology at a very, very young age. So my dad one day came back home with a computer. And my very first thing I wanted to do was to, instead of like playing games, was to really figure out how to build something. So I remember I was probably like 10 and I like spent like time trying to type in programs that would never work. My first computer program was something that said, please draw a clock. Just like, today's in generative AI, you had prompts that like look like that. I figured out that you could prompt a computer, but the technology wasn't there in a way. And so obviously at this time when I was like 10, there was no AI. And so when I wrote that down into a computer and pressed enter, nothing would work. And so that's why I started to learn, take an interest into computer programming. And I started basically from basic. Then I went to C, C++, Java, PHP, and JavaScript. And
So you really learned a lot of languages?
yeah. In the end, you realize that the language doesn't really matter. Like today, I'm basically doing most of the time Python. And I actually dialed down a ton on JavaScript, which was my forte like 4 years ago. So it really doesn't matter. What matters is how you think about the product. And to me, the passion about like building something and showing how it works and solving a problem was exactly what hasn't changed since I was 10. So that was my hook into how I got started into building something.
I think that's a really unique perspective, that it's not about the language, it's about how you think.
Yeah. It's like I spend a ton of time with engineers, and I don't get the highest like joy in like discussing like optimizations or language features, but that's part of my nature. Like, so I'm built to solve problems, and so I rather build something that's not efficient but gets you there than like constantly optimizing. To me, like my role is to be the fire starter, and it's always been like that throughout. So in the end, for me at least, the language doesn't matter. But if you ask a full-on engineer, I think the language does matter, and their functionality and the efficiency they have out of a particular language. That's why I actually prefer these days Python, because it's so intuitive and there's a like thriving community out of it, and like performance-wise, it's also pretty good. So like all in all, if I need to get started with a project, I probably go there because that's where all the community is, and I can build much faster thanks to the help of all the things that have been built so far. Plus, the language is amazing, obviously.
What technologies are you passionate about today? Is it mostly about AI, or?
It's more than AI. I'm actually interested in the potential of AI. Like everybody seems to be talking about RAG or agents, but nobody is really understanding that those are the building blocks that you can use to build something amazing. Like just like 30 years ago with the dot-com boom, when the internet came, people were talking about object-oriented, Java, servers. Then nobody really had thought of the next Salesforce or the next Amazon until somebody came, and then it was Jeff Bezos and built that big thing. That is the big difference. So what I'm really interested about is to understand what are the potential the potential mass adoption drivers for AI. In particular, like we're seeing today, everything is conversational. You still have to talk to an AI to get something done. And in that case, like we feel that our mental overhead is lighter because we don't have to do that thinking job anymore. We just have to task the AI with something. But then the productivity is questionable. Like we might spend actually 1 hour telling the AI how to exactly do a task, when the task, if we did it ourselves, would have taken us 20 minutes, and that's a problem. So to me, what I'm trying to understand is, what is the next automation tool there? What is the next Zapier looking like? And figure out what is the next frontier of the internet based on what all this kind of combination of tools can do.
That's a really deep thought.
Right, but that's also the post, like coming from a developer ecosystem, developer relations background. That's exactly what you need to think about. It's more like, developer relations, we used to historically, we used to go on stage and talk about the product and talk about the set of APIs, and then let the developer figure out how to use them. I think this pattern has flipped over the past few years, and what I used to do with my team, obviously, at Twitter was exactly start from the why they should care, why you should actually build for the Twitter developer platform. And we started with that question. Like, what are the drivers there for developers? Developers have so many choices. They could go and build for the metaverse. They can go and build for AI. But then why they should build for Twitter? And so we made it clear that Twitter wanted people to monetize their apps, that we wanted to put developer apps in front of Twitter users so developers were compelled to build more. And from there, then we reverse engineered the use cases. What are users on Twitter looking for? They're looking to make their timeline more healthier. They're looking to organize their bookmarks. They're looking to understand and learn more things that they didn't see before. And with that, we basically built a series of apps and use cases. So that's why I keep thinking about so deeply about the implications and the use cases and the solutions, because behind all that, there's a ton of thinking about the problem.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
Yep.
Are you giving a talk?
Yes. So I'm going to be talking just probably an hour-ish about how teams, especially EDPR teams, so engineering, product design, and research, organize themselves or not for AI. So I've seen, because of my new business, I've been talking to about 30, 35 leaders in VP of Eng or CTOs, and try to figure out what's their pulse of the situation on AI. Some are completely bearish. They don't want to even think about generative AI. They think it's a toy, and they do not even experiment with it. And then there's teams that just embraced full-on their teams that did reorganizations. They constantly evaluate new patterns, new products, and some in between. So I'm going to basically show the various stages of bear to bull and what's in between, and why certain leaders think about AI in that certain way.
What's the reason to try using AI?
Again, going back to the problem, why you should care about AI. There are so many useful applications. One is efficiency, and that is where pretty much the vast majority of companies who invest in AI are after. They want to do something that didn't scale before in a way that scales. So, for example, if you deal with large quantities of data entry, no matter how many people you put on the job, it's always going to have a fixed cost in terms of time, So it's not going to necessarily scale much in terms of manual operations are going to be much more expensive, but they're just so time consuming. AI instead is very good at detecting patterns, and so it makes it very good for data manipulation. And so that's the one big thing that happens. For example, one of the things that AI does pretty well, and one of the main use cases across many AI-driven orgs, is summarization of large data sets. So out of a 300,000 pages document, give me the 4 or 5 key bullet points, or just summarize a book. These kind of things are very good. And when it comes to doing pattern recognition or trend analysis, or thinking financial services here, legal, healthcare, risk management, all these kind of aspects are very much something for which we see a ton of adoption for AI.
So there's a lot of reasons and benefits to using AI.
Yeah, and also for end users, employees within the company, could also benefit from using AI, from adopting AI. We've seen that all over. A lot of companies try to build their assistant, their agent. You want to have your personal co-pilot. Everybody wants to build something along those lines, because the bet there, the vision is that AI is so accessible now that when trained properly, it could really take your mind off the most mundane tasks and optimize your work. In engineering, this is key already. We've seen that with some companies like Devon. They're building their own LLM to basically have a full-on engineer. Microsoft a few months ago released a proof of concept where it had this concept of agents. So each agent is an AI that talks to another AI as if they were in a team. Those AIs were trained to be engineers, and so they started building code based on a small prompt from an engineering manager, and the human would basically just like watch the result and suggest some changes. That is like the new frontier, the future. I don't know how far or how near we are from that future, but definitely like when you see copilots and like I myself like use AI all the time to help me assist with certain like coding tasks that I don't want to deal with, like database migrations,
Yeah, that's definitely interesting.
Yep.
I think we've had a really good chat today.
Yes, thank
you, Daniela.
Thank you.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everybody, we're back at KubeCon in Salt Lake City, and we're talking with Andy Grabner, who's technology strategist for Dynatrace and co-author of this great new book called Platform Engineering for Architects. You should all check this out because, well, everybody's talking about platform engineering all of a sudden. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike, for having me.
All right. So that's the first question in itself right there. Why are we all suddenly talking about platform engineering? And in your mind, what is fundamentally different from how we've always managed IT? We've been talking about DevOps and programmatically managing IT infrastructure for years. What's changing?
Yeah. Well, maybe first of all, I think what we're doing now with platform engineering is not completely new, but maybe the industry needed a new term. The way I see it, we always see technology shifts, right? From the on-premise monolith to a more decoupled architecture, moving into the cloud, now Kubernetes, who knows what comes next. And every time a new technologies get adopted, at least that's how I see it, and what's also in the book, is individual teams try to figure out, how does this technology work for me? How do I build? How do I deploy? How do I observe? How do I operate? As these technologies become more, let's say, adopted and more stable, more teams within a large organization maybe also adopted, and they then try to figure out, okay, how do I do this? Oh, I just copy something from this team, then I'll do something a little specific to me. So in the end, fast forward, you end up in organizations that have many different ways to do the same thing on the current technology stack, which in the beginning was good because it spurs innovation, but in the end, you're doing a lot of duplicated things, a lot of wasted time. And so platform engineering tries to reduce that wasted time by centralizing the expertise that individual teams have about building containers, deploying it on Kubernetes, monitoring and operating it, and make this available to everyone in the organization through a central platform, which is basically a product for your engineers to get to build, to deploy, to operate. Yeah.
How will this be different than what it used to be? Like, a lot of folks embraced DevOps in the first place to kind of get out from underneath centralized IT. And now we're kind of going back towards that model. So how do we kind of strike a balance between the freedom that people like to have to experiment and innovate and not be beholden to a platform engineering team that says, thou shalt all the time?
Yeah. So first of all, I used to call myself a DevOps activist. So when DevOps has been a big thing, I was also promoting the whole shifting left. You do it, you own everything end to end. But as you scale DevOps, you end up in a situation where you end up with a lot of duplicated efforts. And I think, you've been around for quite a bit. You just told me earlier, you started in 82 with this business. I've been around since the late 90s. So we always see this pendulum, right? More autonomy. We like to do everybody can do whatever they want, complete freedom. And then we bring it back again. And I think the balance strike is now, and this is where platform engineering, I think, might be a little bit different. When you do platform engineering right, you're building a platform as a product. It says you're crafting modern platforms as a product. As a product means I need to build something that my internal users really want. I need to create a desire for my engineering teams to use my platform because it helps them, not because it constricts them to only one thing, but because it takes something away from them that they don't want to do, like maintaining pipelines, maintaining configuration for observability, security, and so on. So I think what's important now is that modern platform teams see their platform as a product, which means it needs to provide value so that people want to come to them. And they also need to craft the platform in a way so that it doesn't constrain people and not going a little bit left and a little bit right. So we hear a lot about these golden paths. So a platform should provide golden paths, but still have a little side door if you want to do something a little bit different. So I think that might be a little bit a different approach on what I see now with platform engineering.
In that regard, it almost seems like we're trying to treat the developer as a customer, create this product, but if I'm selling them a product per se, I have to make sure they're happy. And I think in the previous iterations of all these efforts, we didn't always focus on making the people happy. It was just more like, here it is, and this is all there is to it. And, you know, you can have this car in any color
exactly,
as long as it's black.
Yeah, exactly. And there's two things I want to add to this. It's not just the developer. I think it's everyone that is involved in the development, in the testing, in the operating of software. So that means a platform is also good for your site reliability engineers, for your quality engineers, for everybody that really supports the business to operate well. So that's one thing. And the second thing, what I believe, to your point, whoever the end user is, when we build a platform, we first need to understand who is the end user, what is their problem, how can we solve it, and then how can we take the success of them to make more people within the organization use it. And in the end, it comes back to classical product engineering. Mm-hmm. When we create a product, we want our product to be better than other offerings out there. And we do it by solving particular problems from the users that we know. Once we solve it and they're happy, they become our advocates. And that's also one of the things we write in the book here of understand the user, their pain, solve a problem, and then make them become your advocates so that more people will use the platform, but also architect the platform in a way so that it's not constraining, but it's also open and gives more reasons for other teams to use it as well.
We were having this debate yesterday. How big is the scope of these efforts? Because some people will say platform engineering is about managing DevOps workflows at scale, full stop. But I look at it and I wonder, are we going to be pulling in all the database people, the IT service management people, or all the silos finally going to kind of converge a little bit more than they have historically and will be a little more cohesive?
Yeah, I want to quote ThoughtWorks. I always use their quote in my presentations when I explain platform engineering. And the quote goes, platform engineering is the centralization of expertise. Your database experts, your observability experts, your security experts, they're all experts. But if you have them in center of excellences, they're silos, and then they become the bottleneck if I always have to go to them. So this is why platforms is the way to centralize the expertise, making it available as a self-service platform to foster and increase the innovation of the people that are using the platform, so that not everybody has to become a security observability expert, and not everyone has to go to the center of XYZ to do their job. So I think one model is that you look at the different experts in your organization and bring their expertise into the platform and make it as simply available as a self-service. Now, there's always corner cases where you need a database expert to look at your configuration, so they will also become mentors. But the idea is they provide their expertise as part of a product feature, of a capability of a platform.
Everywhere you go these days, somebody's talking about AI.
Yeah.
As I look at AI, it kind of takes a village to build anything. I got to line up my developers, data scientists, data engineers, security people, and all these things. Will AI essentially force a platform engineering mindset? Because in order to go build these things, we need to kind of have a more centralized approach.
I mean, if you look at the keynote from today, right, that's exactly what the folks have shown. They're building platforms to make everyone easier, leverage the AI models to do their data calculations, to do the predictions. Exactly, it's the same, right? So you have individual experts in parts of that domain, and you can centralize this and make this easier accessible to everyone in the organizations that need to use these AI capabilities without them having to be an expert on how to train the model, right? Making sure it's secure, how to use it. So that's, that's engineering everywhere.
It seems like there's a lot more focus these days on developer productivity as part of this conversation. We've always worried about developer productivity. So as you kind of look at all and how this is coming together, do the developers themselves feel less productive? Or is it more of the business side is just trying to get more out of a limited resource? I mean, who kind of wakes up in the morning and has this kind of aha moment?
No, I think the developers definitely feel it. because I talk with a lot of developers and many are frustrated with having to do things, having to wait on somebody approving a ticket to get some stuff done. The State of DevOps report, which is a renowned report that came out over the last years, the latest edition on platform engineering, I think came up with a number that only 40% of engineering time is spent in productive activities. But another number, which for me is more shocking, is that 36% of developers say they're going to leave the organization because of bad developer experience. So if you're losing your best talent because you make it very hard for them to get their creative work kind of, influencing the next software product that they build, and if they're leaving, that's a bad thing. It takes a long time to hire new people, to train them until they become productive. So to answer your question, developer productivity is a problem. Individual developers feel it because they leave organizations, and organizations also feel it because of the additional costs, longer release cycles, and people leaving, needing to hire and onboard them again. Yeah.
You've talked to a number of organizations that have implemented platform engineering. Are there any common things or traits that they're doing that you're seeing that maybe other people should be copying? And what is it that makes for a successful platform engineering initiative?
Yeah. There's only one advice I have, right? Because you don't want to make that mistake if you don't do it. Start to listen to your developers or to your engineers. Find out what their pain point is, and then build a platform. Don't build a platform because you are here at a conference and everybody talks about platform engineering. Don't just go off to build something where you try to solve a problem and then you don't have anybody that actually has a need to solve this problem. So coming back to what I said, what we also say in the book, crafting modern platforms as a product. Find your end user, find their pain point, solve the problem, then they will come, and don't do it the other way around where you build something and then you hope somebody's using it.
When I look at it, I view it kind of like platform engineering is almost like a social contract between the IT people and their end customers that they're committing to. How do I get the developers to buy into that? Because a lot of the times they're so used to just saying, they have the skills and the resources and they're like, never mind, I'll just go do it myself. But then they become part of the problem.
Yeah. So I think two approaches to this. On the one side, if you're building a platform, you want to make sure whatever you build, you fit it into their existing way of daily work, right? Developers are in their IDE, they are in their Git, they look at certain tools. So whatever you build, you want to make sure it seamlessly follows their basic day-to-day work. So if the platform provides an easy way to provision infrastructure or deploying something, maybe make this available as a command line interface in their IDE or as an extension to the IDE and not make them go into a completely different tool. That's one thing. The second thing is if you have developers that want to, change things, they're building something on themselves already, invite them to become part of your platform engineering team. Not only as the end user that you interview and what you want, but also bring them in, because in the end, modern platform engineering is about building a product, a software product that contains many different moving pieces, but essentially it's a software product. No, it couldn't be better that you actually get developers that want to help you build that software product by stitching together CI, CD, security, observability, right? It's a perfect world.
So you work for Dynatrace. Where does observability fit in this equation? Where do I put it? Does it sit on top of the platform? Is it embedded everywhere? How do I think about observability?
It's in the platform, but there's two major things on observability. The first one is if we're building a platform as a product, that means this is a software product. Every software product needs to run when people need it. It needs to be fast. It needs to be resilient and secure. So you want to apply observability best practices to your platform, to your Argo, to your Jenkins, to your GitHub, to your GitLab, to your Caverna, all of these tools and everything else you build around it. So you need to observe the platform because the platform engineering team needs to know if the platform works as expected. And they want to get alerted in case there's a problem. They want to see who is using it and who is not using it. So the first aspect of observability is observe the platform itself to make sure it's available. The second thing is the major use cases will be to help engineers to create new software through the help of the platform. So that means when they're creating new services, when they are deploying new serverless functions or whatever they do, the platform can automatically inject observability so that everything they do and they build is automatically observed so that they get the logs when they need it, the traces when they need it, that they get alerts when they need it. So that's the two angles, observing the platform to make sure the platform works and observe everything that your engineers do as they work with the platform and as they create value through the platform.
All right. And are you working on the sequel for this yet?
We just released it last week, so I think we need a little bit more feedback from the readers. I hope you have a chance to read it and give us feedback, and then we're happy for a second edition.
All right. Awesome. Everybody, this is Platform Engineering for Architects. You should check it out for sure. And I don't know, are you going to be signing this book here?
We are actually, and it's not just me. It's actually 3 authors, right? It's Max, who initiated the whole thing, Andreas, that's me, and Hillary. Max also happens to be here at KubeCon. So tonight, from 6 to 8, it's Wednesday at the Cube Crawl, at the Dynatrace booth, that's J9. We're doing some book signings. We have a couple of copies that we're happy to give away.
All right, everybody, make sure you stop by and get your book signed. Hey, Andy, thanks for coming by.
Thank you so much for the time.
All right, and we'll be back in a minute.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back. We're live here at KubeCon. If you caught our earlier attempt at going live, we apologize. Someone behind our booth here actually came in and accidentally stepped on the plug. We're not going to say it was intentional.
Yep.
But so we're starting over from the top, and if you've already seen the first 5 minutes, I apologize, but I think it's worth repeating anyway. We are live here in Salt Lake City at KubeCon. It is an amazing KubeCon. The buzz is palpable. There's a lot going on. I want to introduce you to our very first guest of the day here at KubeCon. It's Ramya Sarangarajan.
Sarangarajan. No, you're close. You're close.
If someone pulls the plug again, the next time.
Yes, the next time you'll get it. Yes.
But Ramya is with AWS, and we're going to talk about her role here at AWS. But before we do, let's kind of recreate. Ramya, I know I asked you this already, but it's been quite an opening here for KubeCon, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. So this is my second KubeCon. I was in Paris, and the energy in Salt Lake City is fantastic. As I said, one of the things I like about coming to these conferences is, one, you get to interact with people like you from the industry who have a different viewpoint than us, who are sort of creating these products. But more importantly, we get to engage with our customers who are using our products on a daily basis and sort of hearing what they like, what they don't like, more importantly. And these conversations are just so valuable to us, and we cherish these. We make sure we have a good, large presence. We're able to talk to as many people as possible, and we make sure we take all that back to our leadership and our product teams to ensure that we are always building backwards from our customers. So yeah, it's been absolutely fantastic. And as you and I discussed, the weather's been great. It snowed yesterday, so
Yes.
I have nothing to complain about coming from sunny California.
You know what? I grew up in New York, but I live in Florida now. I'll be honest, I haven't seen it snowing in a long time.
Ah,
It
yes.
was good for
it was
about
good.
the first
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Yes.
Then I remembered why I moved. But you know, there is a critical mass of people here. Of course, in about 2.5 weeks, AWS reInvent is
Yes.
on, and that's 65,000
Yes.
people gathering in Las Vegas, where it'll also probably be cold.
Yes.
But that's quite an event as well.
Yes, and it's. I know my team's been so busy because we've been working on putting this show together. We're working really hard to ensure that we have a great show for our customers and partners at reInvent. So yeah, we are looking forward to that. We always, as I said, appreciate these opportunities to share our innovation and hear back. And yeah, reInvent is going to be special as well. And we hope to sort of see you and engage further with you there as well.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to it. So, Ramya, before we jump into serverless and modernization and Kubernetes, I wanted you to tell your story a little bit, share with our audience. There's a lot of people out here who say, I want a career in tech. I'd like to work for AWS. But I don't know. I went to school. I went to school for technical stuff, or I went to school for business or marketing or what have you. But how do you go there?
Yes.
So if you wouldn't mind, share your story.
Yes. So I didn't grow up in product marketing. But my role today is leading product marketing for both Kubernetes and our serverless products. So really the serverless container world for AWS. But I started way back. I started coding when I was 8. So I actually have lived with computer science and technology for the longest time. So I got my undergraduate degree in computer science and then went on to actually do a sales job selling hardware and software. Really? That's because I was addicted to coding. And so I said, okay, for my own sanity, this is not good because I will be coding all night. And so, the sales piece was just so different from who I was as a person. I was a hardcore engineer. And this sort of exposed me to so many different skills and experiences, which was so invaluable because I was talking to customers day in and day out. And post that, I said, okay, I need to learn more. And I went on to get my MBA and then went into management consulting because I was always in tech and I wanted to understand how healthcare works, how oil and gas works, how financial services work. But I would always drift back to like technology projects even then. So then I decided, okay, I'm done with the experimentation. Let me go back to what is my sort of sweet spot. And I joined VMware in the mergers and acquisitions team, and then moved to product and product marketing. And really, 2 years back, when I had this opportunity to join AWS within the serverless business, I was super excited because, that's where, a lot of changes were working. And then about 9 months back, I also took on the Kubernetes job. So it's been a fascinating experience, sort of knowing all sides of the business in a way, sales, product, and product marketing. But I enjoy this role where I'm able to sort of craft stories on our products for our customers and also be able to, communicate back to the service teams, the folks who are building the engineers on what our customers like and dislike about our product. So yeah, I vastly enjoy this role.
What a great story, though. What a well-rounded resume. You come from that technical side, did that, went into sales, and you know what they say about sales? Salespeople are born, not made.
Yes.
Right? But you weren't born to be a salesperson, but you still have that under your belt. Went into mergers and acquisitions, M&A, real hardcore tech, hard business, bringing it all together into product marketing for you. And, there's a lesson out there for people who are out there. Next time you hear someone whose title is VP of Product Marketing, Manager Product Marketing, don't assume that they're just marketing people or that there's anything wrong with just being a marketing person. Most of these people you're not as unusual as a unicorn as you may think. That is where these people come from. They have that technical background. You can't do this job without understanding the technology. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right? And so a little bit of respect for those people. I want to turn to something else. You mentioned that you had a product marketing for serverless and containers Kubernetes. Now, they're not necessarily joined at the hip, though they kind of are now, but they weren't always. Serverless was out there first. AWS, and of course with Lambda, probably put serverless on the map, right? But there are a lot of people in our audience who everyone's heard of serverless. Some may know what it is, some may think they know what it is, and some don't.
Yeah.
Why don't you explain serverless to them?
Yes, so you're right, Alan, that AWS pioneered serverless about 10 years back. Actually, we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of serverless, as it is the 10th anniversary of Kubernetes as well. So it's almost like, for me, it's a big year of celebration for the businesses that I sort of look after. But serverless 10 years back started off with Lambda, really in a way where we said, how do we abstract the cloud even further? The cloud was born because we told customers that you should focus on what differentiates your business. And running data centers, managing the cooling and patching the OSs was not something that we said, hey, you should be spending your time on. You should be spending your time on what differentiates you, what you're good at. If you're a financial services company, do that because that's your core competence. And in a way, serverless is the cloud on steroids, right? It sort of abstracts this even further, allowing you to focus on what differentiates your business and business value versus, managing the infrastructure underneath. So, and you're right in that both Kubernetes serverless containers are in this umbrella of modern applications, or what we say modernization technologies. So if I think of serverless, we think there are 4 pillars which basically define it, right? One is we abstract away complexity. And how do we do that? Specifically when it comes to infrastructure management, right? Where we say, okay, you don't have to deal with the complexities of managing your servers, your nodes, and we abstract it such that you can focus only on what's important. We help you write as little code as possible. So we say minimizing coding is very important because, as we all know who've written code is a liability, right? It's sort of, the more lines of code you have, the more you have to deal with. So how do we make sure that you write as few lines of code, and how do you bring in more composability into the picture? Number 3, we say, how do you drive higher performance, resilience, availability? And really, a tenet of serverless is AWS specifically with serverless takes care of a whole bunch of the undifferentiated heavy lifting of these pieces, which is how do you drive high performance? How do you drive high availability, resilience? We call these well-architected fundamentals. We say we take care of all of that so that you don't have to worry about it. And last but not the least, and I think this is perhaps it's one of the most interesting pieces of serverless, which is started with the event-driven architectures piece, right? Where compute comes up with Lambda when needed, goes down when it's not necessary. But it also stretches to how you build your systems, how you architect your systems, because it's a sort of a bunch of microservices that talk to one another. And we say architect for extensibility and integration. What that means is you're not just building your service for what you see today in terms of needs, both articulated and unarticulated, but how do you build something that you can expand to pieces that you didn't anticipate 5 years hence? And serverless that way is great for that, because think of it, I always say it's a highway system versus a sort of a suburban road system, because you in a way can connect to the highway and you can add new capabilities and new pieces and in fact new scale if needed without having to restructure and re-architect your entire system. So we think that's the 4 pillars of serverless. Yes. And we see customers sort of take to it. Some folks love it. We say there's a serverless first model. And one last point about serverless is it really started off with compute and Lambda. But today it's sort of extended to many other technologies, right? Whether it's storage systems, our AI ML systems, our generative AI systems. And the reason is in our world, we believe that it's an operating model in a way. It's how you do things. How do people, processes, and technology come together for you to accomplish more, get to market faster, drive agility, while at the same time not compromising on costs or resilience and availability. So I think we fundamentally believe that there's a serverless operating model.
Love it. So now, I said before, all of a sudden Kubernetes has kind of joined at the hip here. When did that happen and why? I think it's tied into the whole modernization thing.
Yes.
But let's just look at Kubernetes and serverless, and then we'll come to modernization.
Yep. So personally for me, it was when we thought of how are people thinking about their workloads, and how are folks thinking about, especially when companies have run workloads in their data centers and want to modernize pieces, what are the technologies they're adopting? Serverless being one. But of course, Kubernetes is almost becoming this sort of de facto standard from a platform engineering standpoint. And in a way, the way we think of our umbrella is there's Lambda, which is serverless, reactive compute, event-driven architectures. We have ECS, which is our Elastic Container Service, but that runs really well on our serverless container platform called Fargate. So that's sort of the world in serverless. And Kubernetes is just a different way of doing things. So, I'm often asked, how do these things merge? How do I look at the world? And I really say these are different operating models. You look at the serverless operating model, and I call it the Kubernetes operating model. And really with serverless, especially in AWS, you think AWS is the API. And with Kubernetes, you have the Kubernetes API, and you're engaging with that. And we see customers make these choices sometimes. And often we don't get into conversations where they're really debating one or the other, because if they want to use Kubernetes, they've already made up their mind on various factors. But we see the biggest drivers being skill sets, right? These require unique skill sets. The ecosystem of tools that customers engage with, interact with, right? Some of them are built on Kubernetes, some of them are built, say, on AWS, and so you want to engage with them and integrate with them heavily. It can also be dependent on various other factors, like what a client is using or what a customer is using, and you sort of just define your technology choice based on that. So that's really the world where it comes in. And interestingly, many of our top customers use both the serverless and Kubernetes technologies, and so we find that they sort of they come in more often, but there's seldom a debate between the two.
Excellent. So you used the modernization word before, the M word.
Yes.
So when cloud first burst on the scene in 2005, 2006, everyone was talking about modernization, but modernization to them was lift and shift.
Yes.
They took their application from a data center, stuck it on a cloud instance. AWS was the only public cloud, and that's it. They modernized.
Yep.
Today, when we talk about modernization, it's a very different playing field. We talk about making something cloud native, which oftentimes is Kubernetes and containers. We talk about using, multi-threaded type of architecture. There's many ways to skin the modernization cat. If you talk to someone in the mainframe world, modernizations means maybe separating the systems of engagement from the system of record.
Right.
Or moving off of mainframe altogether.
Yes.
That's also modernization. However, today when a lot of people talk about modernization, we really kind of zero in on how Kubernetes helps with that. And quite frankly, serverless, because serverless is deemed to be a modern architecture.
Yep.
So why are people making that decision? Is it that you mentioned a little before, sometimes it's a vendor or it's a preconceived notion, but is it seems to be the overwhelming choice for modernization. Why?
I think even before I get into it's actually a very interesting question. Why are folks really thinking about modernization, right? What are the driving factors? It doesn't come at no cost.
No.
You perhaps have to sort of move away from what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and refactor things for a bit, rehost, retire, as you said, just lift and shift, right?
Yep.
These are pieces, and the motivations really, to what you said, Alan, differ a lot depending on the company we're dealing with, the company size, the industry. We still draw some common patterns. Number one being, how am I able to increase my velocity of software development? I think that's been back in the day when I used to work on agile methodologies, and that was considered the modern way to build technologies, right? And we see that's one of the biggest sort of factors. Number two is really the scalability angle, right? We spoke about how do I build systems which are not restricted by the infrastructure footprint I have, and how am I able to sort of scale, not just from a sheer demand perspective, and I'm able to tackle incoming demand, but am I able to change my system? Am I able to make it tackle other things, right? That's a big piece. Interestingly enough, a lot of people modernize for security and performance reasons because they feel that they can leverage cloud technologies, especially when you look at AWS, because we invest so much in scale and availability and security. You're taking off that security operations burden for yourself. And I know this is debatable. A lot of folks actually modernize for cost reasons, right? In a way, because one, we do the sticker price comparison of, hey, how much am I spending on, let's say, if I compare it to on-premises. And I know modernization is not just about moving your on-premises workloads to the cloud. It means many different things. But if I look at those specific workloads, you're spending a lot of time managing your infrastructure on premises, and and then if something new comes in, really for you to refactor, those costs sometimes are not taken into consideration. So we have a lot of customers sort of moving for that as well. So I think these are the motivations. When it comes to technologies like, and then the next question is, what is modernization, right? And you and I discussed, I've stopped defining what a modern app is because that changes by the day. But I can definitely say that there are certain patterns of modernizations that we see. One is, and I always joke, it's basically how do you modernize your entire software supply chain in a way to get these benefits of agility, better performance, better cost, being able to sort of move quickly to meet the again, articulated and unarticulated needs of your customers. But really the tenets are, one, modern technologies, we now see that they're built of basically loosely coupled architectures. What that helps with is your delivery teams can work on these independently, and you can change things around quickly. Number two is they always look at automated DevOps pipelines. So you're able to sort of ship code faster. The velocity is much faster than before. And in this new age, we've gone about 10 minutes without speaking about generative AI. Alan, that's a record.
That's a record. We've done 15. Very good.
But using modern technologies like coding assistants, where I do not have to write long lines of code, but something automatically generates it for me. So generative AI is sort of becoming center stage when writing code. So I would say these are sort of roughly the tenets of modern applications or modernization practices. But it's really a change of how people process and technologies come together. And that's how we look at it, at least from the AWS world.
I agree. Let me ask you a question. I know you work for AWS, but I'm going to put you in a funny position. What makes the AWS modernization on serverless and Kubernetes platform the right choice for our audience versus, I'm not naming names, but other competitors?
Yeah. Yes. And while we sort of have this community working with us in serverless, I say the biggest validation on these pieces is it's not you who's just singing this tune, but a whole bunch of people are, right? Mm-hmm. And we've sort of had these movements, I would say, to serverless, yes, and even Kubernetes to a large extent. We were sort of a very big investor in the ecosystem, and that helped the adoption. But I think for us, what makes AWS stand apart is, number one, we have a high focus on sort of making sure the fundamentals just work, right? Whether it's availability, whether it's security. I've had a lot of customers tell me we choose you because of security, because of the fact that you focus so much on that. We believe in sort of making sure our infrastructure and the services that are built on our infrastructure are highly performant. And so even the way we architect our regions, the way we architect our individual services, the isolation pieces we provide, I think are just one of the things we try and make sure that that's the highest standard possible, right? That's number one. Number two, especially with Kubernetes, right? We don't want to abstract away the benefits of Kubernetes, right? I think the beauty of Kubernetes is the fact that it changes so quickly, but at the same time, the innovation is not sort of constrained by what AWS provides. So, and you're able to sort of operate within the ecosystem and the upstream tools that are there. I know a lot of companies which build their entire technology sets on Kubernetes, and this is where we say we are able to bring the best of both worlds, right? AWS resilience, availability, security, and Kubernetes. And one last piece, we speak about is the integrations that we provide. Not just with our own services, right? Our 200 plus services, whether you want security tools, whether you want monitoring tools, whether you want observability tools, but also the fact that we have an ecosystem of partners who really plug into the AWS piece. So I would say that's what sets it apart now, especially with Kubernetes. We also give you options. You want to run on AWS Cloud, great. If you want to run on premises, we have what we call EKSA, right? Which helps you run on premises. Hey, you want something at the edge or closer to you, but you don't want to, you don't want to buy the hardware. We have EKS on Outposts, which again give you. So that sort of selection of choices on where you want to on stack.
Well, talk about modernization. That is right.
Yes.
And you doing it yourself versus using an AWS. Are you going to go build out the edge and the on-prem and the cloud?
Exactly.
That's big CapEx.
Yep. And then compute choices. I mean, again, we have the largest compute choices in the world now, especially with all the GPUs, right? You're free to do what you want. And I think the fascinating thing about this, Alan, is it's not pieces that we anticipated our customers to build. It's what they build, and they surprise us in a way. And we're like, wow, this is fantastic, right? When you're able to build something that we didn't initially perceive possible with our technology. So that's what is most gratifying.
That's one of the beauties of technology is you put your technology out there and then people take it in ways you didn't think of.
Yep.
And that's kind of what builds this whole thing.
Yep.
I know you've got reInvent in 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks. Without getting you in trouble or me in trouble, can you maybe just share with the audience? No one's watching. So what's in the future, near-term future, maybe a little longer-term future for the serverless Kubernetes modernization
Yes.
track?
let me talk about Kubernetes and let me talk about serverless, though you'll see these things blending, right? And I spoke to you about the 4 pillars of serverless, which in a way I think dictates what we do as AWS, and I can extend this to Kubernetes in a way as well, right? So the 4 pillars of serverless, extending that to Kubernetes. Our biggest sort of investments are in how do we abstract away operational complexity, specifically with Kubernetes, so that your operations people and your developers can focus on what's differentiated for your business. You know, it was funny when I first got introduced to the Kubernetes world, Alan. I actually Googled what's a container, what's Kubernetes when I knew I was getting the job back in about 4 or 5 years back, and one of the first statements I read was, Kubernetes is fantastic for developers because it makes the life of operators a nightmare, right? And I think one of the things we've been focused on for the last 6 years of us having EKS is how do we make this simpler and easier so that you can ship code faster, you can have production-ready systems. You don't have to spend a lot of time and energy maintaining systems. So we're going to absolutely focus on this piece. The other element, in a way, that we're going to focus on, and you've heard our CEO say this as well, is bringing keeping the focus on developers. How do we ensure that our developer experience is uncompromised? How do we make sure that they're able to write code quickly and really be able to sort of get the best of the infrastructure that we provide, best of the tooling that we provide, without having to spend a lot of time and sort of just getting things done, right? So, and really only focus on innovation. So I would say those are primarily what we are focusing on. We relentlessly focus on our fundamentals, and you'll get sick and tired of us hearing about our performance improvements, but we just had a couple released, and we'll continue doing that. Especially on the Kubernetes side, we had a couple of interesting open source launches, and we're going to continue investing in the community because we believe that's fundamental to our learning. Yes. And in a way, we're able to sort of drive more innovation, which is, I think, in the benefit of all of us who play in this ecosystem.
I'll tell you a quick story. The very first, I went to a DockerCon in Austin. I think it was 2016. Mm-hmm. I came back. We were just launching what is today Cloud Native now. Mm-hmm. I was going to call it Docker something, and I said, we can't use the name Docker. They own it. We'll have to go with containers. I said, there was this other thing there from Google called Kubernetes. It'll never catch on. It's too hard. Yeah. Well, that's why I'm still working and not retired, I guess. It's new. But one other quick area I want to touch on. I know we're over time, but you did mention AI. Mm-hmm. You can't get out of an interview without talking about it. How do you see either generative AI, agentic AI, machine learning, how are these all coming together to help shape AWS's offerings to make developers' lives better, to help operators, to make Kubernetes maybe, dare I say, easier?
Yes. So you've heard of the 3 ways or 3 layers in which we approach generative AI, and I know it's said many times, so I won't go over that again. But in a way, we have a lot of our customers running their models on Kubernetes. Mm-hmm. And that is fantastic because it gives you that scale, it gives you the resilience, it gives you that ecosystem of tooling, which is fabulous when you're looking at building models that are specifically, which are sort of, let's say, large scale. We also have customers fine-tuning these models on EKS. And that is fantastic because then you're able to apply the contextual piece but leverage something that's already there. Of course, you have the choice of using Amazon Bedrock, right, in order to connect to these pieces. There may be a time, and I don't know, if I can see into this crystal ball, which will tell me the future, as you said, I would have...
me both.
Yes. But in a way, we think the choice would remain with Bedrock, right? We think customers would demand choice and not be this one way of doing things. And so we will continue investing in that ecosystem and of the choices that customers have. Specifically with Kubernetes, I think it'll continue getting better at sort of talking to the GPUs and being able to help you build these large-scale models. But I also think we'll get very good at inference. We are getting better inference, and customers are using a lot of EKS for their inferencing. And really, this is about our ability as a service provider to connect to different models, depending on what you need, and being able to quickly process that and deliver insights. And that's where I think even my world, sort of the 2 pieces of my 2 like, in a way, the legs that I stand on, sort of come together because we think, serverless in a way, and that the way you operate would be also able to connect to these endpoints. I think it shines in integrating endpoints, and in a way, these pieces can come together for you to infer whatever you need. So, well, as I said, I don't have the crystal ball, but I think it'll be one of those things where we think we'll be right front and center, leading the revolutions that our customers are sort of embarking on, and sort of in a way continuing to provide those choices, not just for our biggest customers, but also for those who are trying to experiment and do something new, which is what I think, as I said, it's always fascinating to see customers build what you didn't even anticipate. So, yep.
Love it. Romney, I have to apologize. We kept you here way longer than we said.
It was always a pleasure.
I think it was worth it. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
AWS serverless and Kubernetes. Check it out. Get ready for reInvent in 2 weeks, too.
Absolutely.
But first, we've got a lot more here to do at KubeCon. We're live. We'll be back in a moment. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.
Hi, I'm Larry Matroni, and I'm here to talk to you about the title of this talk, Security versus Speed, a culture that chooses both. So we normally think of security and speed as trade-offs, but the data does not back that up. The teams that are able to move the fastest are actually the ones with the highest security. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time explaining why that's true, but I'm going to describe to you how you get to a situation where that's the case, and then you'll just have to try it to see how you experience that both going up at the same time. So I'm going to give you a little provocative idea to sort of drive home this point of what I really mean. And the provocative idea here is that the way you do service level agreements for vulnerabilities, 10 days for criticals, 30 days for highs, 180 days for mediums, or whatever the heck your SLAs are actually harmful. I think that if you have any medium, any highs, and any criticals, if you have any criticals, you shouldn't work on any highs. If you have any highs or criticals, you shouldn't work on any mediums. And you should focus all of the attention on the criticals first and get to completely clean, and not just completely clean, get into a blocking mode such that you never have criticals get into production again after that point. And so that's where the less than 1 day SLA comes from. You basically don't have an SLA on anything other than the part you're working on, and it gets resolved and stays resolved, stays clean, and then you start to work on the other areas. And that is much more effective way of doing risk reduction. So before I get too far into this, a little bit of about my background so you know where I'm coming from. There's some logos that are going to come up there that sort of describe where I'm from and what I've done. But there's really two things I would like you to know about me. First of all, I was the head of application security at Comcast. And most people realize, in the States at least, that Comcast is a cable company. But there's a lot of properties and a lot of product development, 10,000 developers, 10,000 people working on development teams, and 600 different development teams, and spread across all sorts of business units that you maybe forget are part of the Comcast family, like NBC and Universal and DreamWorks and Peloton and Hulu backend, and all the cable company systems in Canada are back-ended by Comcast products, et cetera. So all the ad placement. So there's a lot to that environment. Very diverse, a lot of acquisitions, and I had to put in place a system that got developers to take more ownership of security. Over the course of 5 years, it took me, I got pretty much all the development teams to at least commit to doing that. I got about halfway there before I left. But then the commitment from the management was that we would do the rest. And it was highly successful. lower cost of running the program, AppSec program, and much higher risk reduction, 6x better risk reduction than the prior way of doing it. And the system I'm going to talk to you about today is essentially that how you get to that culture, how you make that culture actually happen. And the second thing I'd like you to know about me is that I'm an active developer. I write code almost every day. I'm the primary author of a dozen open source projects, one of which gets 1 million downloads a month. And is used by, all the cryptocurrency exchanges and every cloud vendor, and it's considered critical infrastructure by the US government because they don't want it to be a vector for supply chain attacks. And so it's got to be highly secure. And everything I'm going to talk to you about here is the way I run that project. There's a 20 or so contributors to that project, and I run it exactly like the system that I'm about to describe to you here in this talk. Okay, so I'm going to start with sort of setting the scene a little bit here. So app and API security is fundamentally broken today. And so this is a pretty typical, this is a cumulative flow diagram, but it's pretty easy to read if you've never seen a cumulative flow diagram before. Basically, this orange line goes up when new vulnerabilities are detected. This green line goes up when they're either marked as resolved or marked as false positives. And then this blue one represents the portion that is resolved as by being marked as false positives. And you can see here that this gap in the open vulnerabilities never really gets lower. And in fact, it's increasing dramatically. And the only place where they reduced it dramatically is when they marked a bunch of stuff false positives here. And you could argue that they weren't really. They just sort of said, "Oh, we're just going to declare risk accepted and move on." So this widening gap, we stop getting a bit dinged with this. This is pretty typical. In fact, I see a lot worse than this at times, where the findings just run away from the resolution, and then you're stuck with this inventory management problem, and that's where the SLAs, the tendency comes into play. That 180 SLA. Of course, that just gives them permission to wait the full 180 days before they even think about it. And they're still not going to think about it when 180 days pass unless you ding them for being past the 180 days. But you shouldn't ding them for that if they've got some criticals or even highs that are open. And so this is fundamentally unhealthy. This is what a healthy cumulative flow diagram looks like. So you took them a little while to get going with resolution, but once they got going with resolution, it took about 3 months after the tools started detecting vulnerabilities. And they resolved them pretty rapidly. And, there's a little story about this spike in false positives for this team. And this resolution ramp is essentially a representation of that, because we changed the tool to the false positive because the tool was configured wrong. And as soon as we did that right here, boom, all those findings that were from that bad rule got fixed. And so this way of running the program, where you actively are trying to reduce false positives, leads to better trust between the engineers and the security folks who are running the tools. And it leads to this sort of rapid resolution. And they're pretty much staying even with it ever more. And you could look at this curve for just criticals, and it would just shift to the left a little bit, because the emphasis is to just resolve the criticals, not even think about the highs. And they didn't really start working on the highs till this steep curve here. And so this one has both criticals and highs being shown here. And there's no mediums shown here. This team never got to mediums before I left Comcast. And this is data from Comcast I had permission to show, because I've shown it publicly while I was there. So I keep saying don't work on the highs until the criticals are resolved. Don't wear the mediums till the highs are resolved. Let's theoretically back that up with why that's the case. And the theory is called the theory of constraints. And the idea here is very similar to the weakest link concept, is that every human process, and resolving vulnerabilities is a human process, has bottlenecks. And if you make an improvement anywhere beside the bottleneck, it's just wastefulness. So, and the weakest link is the same concept. So if you improve the strength of this link, the chain doesn't get any stronger. The only link that you can improve the strength of and the chain will get stronger is this. And so I contend that finding vulnerabilities is not the bottleneck, and resolving them is. And yet we spend a lot more energy buying new tools to find more stuff, or better find stuff, more easily find stuff, and rolling them out to far and wide without worrying about the resolution curves. We want to get the tool spread across the environment. And then we think about resolving as a later exercise. When you'd be much better taking a depth-first approach. Depth-first in terms of you install the tool in one team for one product, and then you expand it to a second product, and then you expand it to another team, expand it to a whole business unit, you expand it to other business. So deploy it that way. But every time you deploy it, you also focus on resolution, not just deploying it. You focus on just the criticals first, and then you focus on just the highs after that, and then you focus on the mediums after that. And so it's a depth-first approach rather than a breadth-first approach, and we tend to take a breadth-first approach to our detriment. And that's sort of the one of the key insights to the whole program that I implemented at Comcast that greatly reduced risk. So about the time I launched the program at Comcast, I wrote this thing called the DevSecOps Manifesto, the original one. There was another one that came later. And basically, I've kind of drifted away from that a little bit. And I've even drifted away from the term DevSecOps a little bit because it's gotten overloaded and it's, misused. And a lot of people basically misused it by saying, let's slap some DevOps lipstick on a traditional security pig and call it DevSecOps. And so I don't actually use the phrase DevSecOps much anymore. Even though my title at Contrast, where I work now and help companies to sort of implement this culture, has DevSecOps a transformation architect. So even though it's in my title, I still think of it more as developer centric or shift left or shift smart. Or there's not a great term, unfortunately, for it. But it's all of these things. But all of these things mean three things to me. It's empowered engineering teams taking ownership of the security of the products that they are building. So you build it, you run it. You've maybe heard in the DevOps world, you build it, you run it, you secure it is DevSecOps to me. Or you build it, you secure it, you run it, maybe if you want to get the order right. So they own it. And they don't own all of it. And they get a lot of help from the security group, just like they get a lot of help from ops people. And as particularly SecOps is still going to be a separate thing for the foreseeable future. But they own as much of it as possible, and they are worthy of being trusted with that ownership. So that's one. Two is you do it in a DevOps way, and I don't just mean you slap some DevOps lipstick on it, and I don't just mean you bought a CI tool and you started, quote, using the CI tool. You basically follow these concepts that DevOps is sort of put forward, the three ways of DevOps, they're called. Flow, which has now actually been renamed. It was always originally this systems thinking, but Flow was shorter. So I think Gene Kimmel originally went with Flow. But basically Flow and systems thinking are to think holistically about the risk of the overall system and the work you could do in the overall system. Feedback, rapid feedback, in context feedback, rich feedback. And a culture of experimentation and learning. So try things and measure how effective they were and then adjust based on that. And don't just go with the policy manual as a dead document that is out there, or trusting some third-party list like OpenSAM or the OWASP list framework or PCI or whatever. Basically learn and adapt and evolve. And if you do this, you come up with what I call practices. By the way, before I move on, the third thing here on this page is never forget that you're building software. And that's the value that the software engineering folks provide to the organization, and that's the bottom line. It's DevSecOps. It's not SecDevOps. It's not Ops SecDev. It's DevSecOps. It's you really have to produce a product, and anything you do that slows that down, it better be slowing it down temporarily and speeding it up later. And this is the way to do it. So these are the practices. This is an example list of practices that a company who is engaged with me to help them develop this program, to adopt this program, this transformation blueprint, if you will, might come up with. And I say might come up with an example because I don't want you to simply adopt this one, but I'm going to use this one as an example to describe what a really good set of practices actually looks like, and what the characteristics of that are, and even some of the specifics of the way the practices are defined here. I'm going to talk a little bit. So when I do these workshops to help teams develop their own list, they come up roughly similar, maybe 2/3, 3/4 the same in terms of the things that are on the list. And the weightings can be more different than that. But so this is a good representative Senate list. So let's talk about the characteristics that makes this list important. So it starts with non-security engineering practices. And there's a couple reasons for this. First of all, it's not all of the SDLC defined here. It's just 4 practices from a robust DevOps SDLC. It's the ones that will make it easier to efficiently and effectively do the security things later that I'm highlighting here. And they're the ones that if you're missing these, you can't do it the optimal way. And so what the tendency of security leaders is I need a least common denominator policy or set of practices that will work for even the teams that aren't doing great engineering. But my argument is you can't have great security without great engineering. And you got to advocate for some minimally great engineering if you're really going to ever do security effectively. And I think it's important for you to be, that's the first reason. The second reason is if you come out as an advocate for great engineering, you put yourself in a different light. Security people put themselves in a different light to the engineering people. And that builds the relationship. And a lot of this is psychology and sociology. And then that's the key to the difference between success and failure of rolling out a program like this. And so this is one of those things that you do that sort of helps with that psychology aspect of it, sociology aspect of it. So I've got, working agreements. I've got ephemeral build test infrastructure. So, that a lot of people have that. They bought it. How well are they using it? For instance, can they stand up a database in the test infrastructure ephemerally and populate it with enough data to run automated tests? If they can't do that, they're not really effectively going to get the DevOps benefits that are advertised from DevOps. It's this whole idea of cloud native providing you with this ability to just instantly stand up a virtual environment. Now, there's a lot of engineering work that has to go into making this transition from having a dedicated test environment to having an ephemeral one, including databases and message buses and data in those databases. And so this is what I'm calling out here, is that work that needs to get done to do that. And then are you running tests in this ephemerally? A single test that gates on the pull request is like worth a ton, because as soon as you get a single test, then you start to get more tests. And anytime we implemented this at Comcast, helped someone implement this effectively at Comcast, within 6 months they had 80% test coverage run in the pipeline, most of the time. I mean, not every time. And then getting to that 80% level is also important as well. So those are the 4 that I call out for pre-engineering practices. There's prioritization, which enables gamification. So there's a weighting on these things. So the order is generally in the order of dependencies. Like you have to do this one before you do this one. And then the weighting is based on sort of the value, the risk reduction value it might provide. Or maybe it's the portion of the value that's sort of pre-work versus the later risk reduction value. So it's not science. It's sort of like psychology. We're going to put these many points on doing this thing, and then you're going to gamify it. And by gamify it, I mean you have a leaderboard for each development team. When they adopt a practice, then they get that many points, improvement points. And the leaderboard for the teams with the most improved scores in the last 90 days are on the leaderboard, and the ones with the absolute highest overall scores are on a different leaderboard. And you emphasize the improvement leaderboard, at least at first, but maybe even indefinitely. And then the absolute one is just to sort of reward people who got there and finished the program and are continuing to slightly improve after that. Gamification, there's a lot more to that. I don't have time to go into all that today, but it's really key, and it's really important to do it. You get no points for running scanning tools. You get no points for finding vulnerabilities. That is of zero value. In fact, it's probably of net negative value. You only get points if you get to clean for some small slice of the findings. And the small slices are risk prioritized. So we have here critical clean for third-party code you import. So this is SCA, this is open source vulnerabilities. It's just open source vulnerabilities. It's not SQL injections that your own developers wrote. And it's just the criticals. And that's worth 12 points. And it's worth 12 points for critical clean for the code you write vulnerabilities, the first-party code vulnerabilities, SQL injections and cross-site scriptings that your own developers have injected in there. And then you start to work on the highs, and they're worth less points. And then I don't even list the mediums on this example here, but you could and get assign points to them. So it's this idea that you get and stay clean, and clean involves putting a blocker in place so that you can't ever release with criticals. Once you get criticals clean, you never release with criticals ever again after that. And that's how you get to this less than 1 day MTTR that I spoke about earlier. So how do you sort of organize this? Well, it's got to be sliced pretty thin. So it's got to have a shallow on-ramp. That's why I separate criticals from highs, and that's why I separate first-party code and third-party code, because I want to give people something they can achieve in 90 days and get and completely accomplish and consider that done and never fall back on again. It has to be small enough that they don't feel like it's too daunting, and then we move on. In fact, when in practice, you'll slice that you might slice this even smaller. If there's 100 eyes and they don't think they can get it done in 90 days, then you might say, okay, that's fine. You've got all the criticals. You have less than 1 day MTTR for all the criticals going forward. You have highs with the first 5 of the OS top 10 or the first 12 of the SANS top 20, and you slice it even narrower than that. That shallow on-ramp is really important. Okay, so how do you get this list? Well, here are the critical elements to hosting a workshop, and I host these. As my job at Contrast, I do these a lot. I do these publicly. I do these with just your organization. But the critical elements are this. First of all, you have to have the engineering leaders in the room, the 3 to 5 most respected engineering leaders in the room. It can't just be the CTO or the VP of engineering. If they aren't actively working with code every day, they're maybe out of touch. Maybe they're invited, but you got to also have some of the hands-on folks as well. In fact, it should be dominated by those hands-on folks. It's typically the team leads of the hottest products, the crown jewel products at your organizations. These are the ones that have the best tools and the best teams, and everyone wishes they could be like these guys and listens to them, looks up to them. Why do you have these people in the room? 2 reasons. First of all, you'll come out with a better list of practices this way. So that's the obvious reason. But the more important and a little more subtle reason, though, is that you're starting the sales process here. So if you were to just come out as a security leadership group, come out with a new policy or a new set of practices and say, here, you have to do this, they're likely to ignore it. And they're the decision to ignore it is gonna be basically they're gonna go to these 3 to 5 most respected people. They're gonna say, hey, is this just another one of those things we can just sort of let die and not actually listen much to unless we get harassed with it, or should we really adopt this? And they're gonna say, I was in the room when we created that. These 3 to 5 leaders are going to say, and it is really good. It is really the right way to do security, the developer or the engineering way to do security, not the security way to do security. And I was there to help make sure that was the Now, if you pre-draft it, that doesn't happen. And so you got to enter the room with a blank slate. And you can have it in your head, right? You know what you think should be on the list if you're a security leader. But you gotta not bring a draft of the practice list into the room. You have to create it with Post-it notes. And the reason for that is that you don't get sort of groupthink that way, where one person says something, everyone goes, yeah, that's pretty good. I don't really feel like arguing why it's not perfect, and I'll just roll with it. And you don't want that to happen. You get everyone to work independently, like just one person coming up with their own 5 favorite practices, and then you have them all put them up on the board and you organize them. And that way you don't get any groupthink, and you get everyone's wording is different. The terminology usage is different, and you get the conversations as you start to do the grouping, and that's where all the magic happens. That's where the great practice list comes out of that. You end up with this mindset shifting. These conversations lead to mindset shifting and blind spot revealing alignment. And that is hugely valuable. That's probably the most valuable aspect of hosting this workshop. You also get this weighted list of practices. And then it's written in language that is acceptable to and well understood by, isn't ambiguous to a developer. I remember, there was a policy that talked about known vulnerabilities. And I asked people in the security group who wrote the policy manual what was meant by known vulnerabilities. And they had different answers. And so then you went to the developers and you asked them, and they had different answers. And so how do you actually enforce a policy if you have ambiguity of terms? So you don't use that phrase, or if you do, you define it clearly there. And that's an example. But there's a lot of things like break the build. It happens a lot. Like, what does that actually mean, break the build? And so you have to actually define these things more carefully, and use language that's explicit and really gets it accurately right. You don't just say the workshop's over and we're done. This is a living and breathing thing. And in particular, the first couple weeks afterwards, you're testing this list out by coaching teams. We'll talk about coaching here briefly for a minute because I'm running out of time here. With real folks. And then you keep having to sort of tweak it over time. Maybe you get to the point where you don't change the list itself or the weightings but once a year, which is the point we got to at Comcast, but you're tweaking the documentation that's behind the bulleted list of practices all the time, with examples and links to architectural, security architecture, working code, libraries, etc. All of that gets built out over time and constantly gets tweaked. So you have this list of practices because you hosted this workshop. You tested it out briefly. How do you actually roll it out? Well, you roll it out with coaching. And coaches are not necessarily security experts, just like Ted Lasso was not a soccer expert when he went to go coach a soccer team. He was an American football expert, expected to fail. But Ted didn't fail because he knew about getting more out of people, getting them to work well together. And that's the role of the coach. It's very hard to get people who have been doing vulnerability management to step into this role effectively. They're used to calling someone's baby ugly all day. The people who they're speaking to are used to being talked to them by them as their baby's ugly all day. It's very hard to get that trusting coaching relationship going there. I hired Scrum Masters, the first few roles that filled this. I later actually hired an auditor and a few other different types across the organization, some of which you could argue were doing vulnerability management. But that was later in the program when it became clear they even realized that the way they had been doing vulnerability management was destructive and not productive. And the new way that I was sort of pushing to replace theirs, and their jobs were going away. Some of those people did come over and become coaches at Comcast. One of the principles of coaching is that there are no red marks for the current state of maturity, the current adoption rate. The only thing you get dinged for is failure to improve. You're not even trying. And you get this commitment from engineering leadership up front when you start to roll the program out. We are going to ask every team to adopt 1 to 3 of these practices every 90 days. So it takes about 1.5 years to adopt all of them if they're starting from 0. But are you okay with that? Will you help us advertise that? Will will you set that expectation that they, even if it takes away a little velocity from feature work, they are to adopt 1 to 3 of these practices every 90 days. And that's all you get dinged for, is if you fail to improve in a given 90-day period below a certain threshold. Once you get to 80% of the points, then it stops to be something you would even get dinged for failure to improve, because it's harder that last 20, and they're less valuable that last 20. Okay, so I don't have time now to go into detail of the coaching philosophy a little bit, but it is well thought out. And so just move through these slides quickly. Notice there's no red marks for the adoption maturity. It's just shades of green. We had red, amber, green, and we found that people were tendency to lie when there was amber or green or red on the board. So we just shifted it to shades of green. You host workshops as coaches to do this, and there's some key people that have to be in the room. The business people have to be in the room to do them, and there's a process for hosting the workshops. There's some tooling you can use, and so one of my open source projects is called transformation.dev blueprint. You can go to transformation.dev and sign up for a beta if you want. But it has this way to put in this list of practices and a way to sort of host the coaching sessions and a way to visualize the output. And this is sort of example screenshots for an earlier version of that. You have to coach each team individually. You can't do it, say, all of engineering. We're going to just say all of you have adopted this practice, because it doesn't work that way. Even within a single business unit, 2 sister teams that work closely together can have very different maturity and tech stacks and the whole 9 yards. And so the first objection I get to this is it doesn't scale. It scales beautifully because this coaching model is very much workshop driven, and they're 90 minutes for the first one and 60 minutes for the following ones. And you only have to host them once every 90 days. So a single coach can handle theoretically 100 teams. At Comcast, we typically, once they got above 75, we started hiring new coaches to get that back down again. So we never had anyone consistently be above 100 teams that they were in their domain. But we got, in the 75 to 100 range for everybody. We tried to stay in that sort of range, and it worked. They had enough time to pay attention to those teams and keep them going with that. And different teams are at different stages in the process. So that, when they're a year into the program and they've done 4 quarterly workshops, they pretty much know the routine and they can do a lot of it on their own and sort of move. I mentioned Transformation Blueprint. I'm going to mention Contrast. When I left Comcast, I had a choice where to go. All the tool vendors, we had a dozen sort of tool vendors, all the top name SaaS vendors you can think of, like Checkmarx and Veracode and AppScan and Coverity and you name it, we had it. And Contrast. And I chose Contrast. I got job offers from most of them. I chose Contrast because teams at Comcast that had been using Contrast were the most successful. So I wanted to come to a company that basically fit with that vibe. I don't have too much time to go into sort of what Contrast is, but it's basically one agent-based tool, very much like an APM agent, except you use it pre-prod for most people most of the time. So it's not just runtime in production, it's runtime during testing. And that's why automated testing is so important to use, to have, not just for quality reasons, but for security reasons. So you can replace your SAST and DAST and SCA tools. But it also has production sort of oriented things. We can block attacks, and we can give you, the blast radius for an attack. And we can also give you a reverse engineered security blueprint for an attack going on, what databases are involved and what kind of data are in those databases. So we have all these different things in our product. It's a great fit for this model that I just described. So that's all I have for you today. Please hit me up for questions, connect with me on LinkedIn and send them directly. You can also ask for a demo there, or even ask to schedule a transformation workshop. There's no charge for that first workshop. It's a half day or spread out over a week. And I do these all the time for people that maybe don't even buy Contrast in the end, although a lot of them do. So that's why we continue to offer it for free to prospects for Contrast, and they continue to pay me to work there. So thank you.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hi everyone, my name is Julia Wood, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about improving DevOps workflows using generative AI and GitHub Copilot. And a little bit about me. I am the AI Impact Lead at GFT Technologies. I am the 18 years Microsoft MVP. The first Brazilian GitHub star. I'm 4 years in this program, but it's a personal honor to me to be the first one in Brazil to be a part of this team. And I'm a speaker in technical conference like that. I'm a YouTuber about technical contents like DevOps, career, productivity, and other contents like that. Here is my YouTube channel, my LinkedIn profile, and my mail. If necessary, okay? And we're gonna talk about GenAI on DevOps workflows, and I think the best important point is talking up shortly about what is generative AI, because, well, it's around everything about Steam and about the software development lifecycle in next years. And basically, generative AI is a kind of AI that using algorithms to create a new content like a text, like images, like videos, and in our case, create a source code, create documentations, and support us in a lot of tasks in the software development lifecycle. And this tool is called generative AI because, well, it's a little bit obviously because this generates a new content based on training data, on historical data. And this AI can be understanding your request to generate a new content based in what you are needed here. And to work with the GenAI tools, important technique was born. The prompt engineering technique, or the prompt engineering, it's a new position in some projects right now. And what is this? In general, the prompt engineering is the art of crafting effective instructions to get the best responses from AI models. And why I'm talking about the art? Because it's not properly exact science, because we cannot have, for example, the same answer for the same question, and we have no specific rule to create a good prompt. For example, if I request this specific question, I will be received this specific answer. It's not a really true information. In general, we need to work as an artist to understanding what works, what not, and create a best prompt, a best approach, a finely tuned prompt to support your creation. And it's not only for creating images or videos. To create texts, to create source codes, documentations, all of them follow the same instructions. And the prompting properly, basically, it's a piece of information, a collection of information that you can provide to generative AI to generate a content based on your request and in your AI training data. The generative AI uses the both of them to generate a best answer for you. And you need to understand here, you need to create a detailed prompt or with a more context as possible to create a best answer. Basically, if good things are in the prompt, good things will be answered. If you provide no good information in the prompt, probably your answer will not be good too, okay? And here, for example, I have 2 requests that I did on GitHub Copilot with basically the same prompt. It's essentially the same prompt. Basically, is that I'm building an application to display electric vehicle data give me some options for how to structure this app. In the first one, I have no many details. I'm directly on that I need. And okay, GitHub Copilot answered to me. And this answer is okay, it's a good answer, but it's not specific for what I really need. In the second one, I provided more information. For example, I specified that I use in Express and TypeScript, or I'm large-scale application. I need to use a Keycloak to authenticate. My front end will be using TypeScript and will be deployed on Azure Kubernetes. Using all of this information in the prompt, the GitHub Copilot can provide to me a more specific answer, a more useful answer to me. I not pasted here all prints, but here you can see the difference about the answer. In the first one, I received the options. In the second, I received the structure following my request. In the other parts of this answer, I received the piece of codes for Docker container, for scripts to Kubernetes services, to scripts for GitHub Actions. I received more specific information for my request. Basically, as I mentioned, good things in, good things out. Okay? And how this prompt works on GitHub Copilot, but not only on Copilot, but in general, the other tools that use in generative AI works the same model, okay? Basically, you as user will be request something. For example, in this case, create a web server in TypeScript, and this information will be sent for GitHub Copilot. What happened here in the backend? The GitHub will include a system tag here, and this system tag basically is the chatbot or the assistant rule settings. And for example, the GitHub are including, you are a friendly code assistant, and probably the most content here is something like that. You will be answering only question about the source code. You are not creating vulnerabilities on the code, or you are not able to answer question about politics. All of them on system information will be create a set of rules that this tool need to follow, okay? And in the user will be attached your request, and it will be sent for LLM model. In this case, for GPT-4, GPT-4o, or other model, but you can use AWS models or other LLM models. Don't care. And your answer will be processed by OpenAI or LLM, and include here a new tag for assistant tag with the answer, and this answer will be considered the training data, the system tag, the user requests to create a good assistant message, okay? And Copilot or the other GenAI tool returns for you a piece of code or the answer that you request, okay? Okay, but probably you're thinking, why you need to use GenAI tools on DevOps workflows, on DevOps process? And an important thing to remember here is it's a point that some people forget, because the DevOps is not only about CI and CD automations. It's not about build and deploy the application on cloud environments or in other places. The DevOps is general about the entire software development lifecycle. It's about all people on this process since the ideation, the code creation, the testing, QA teams, infrastructure teams, monitoring process. All of them is a part of the software development lifecycle and the DevOps process. And okay, to me, it's important for now in this specific talk, 4 core items focused specifically on the developers to increase, to use GenAI tools in a DevOps workflows. These key tools are enhance the developer experience, increase the productivity, increase the learning, and focus on the business. And why this for us most important in my opinion? Well, when I started to work in a software development a lot of years ago, I don't remember the correct year, one of the first lessons that I learned from my first boss was the user experience is the most important part of the software development, because if the user don't like your application, the application will be not used, and this job it's a trash. Basically, it's that. And yes, it's really true. It's important, but we forget an important part of this process. Okay, now more people are talking a little bit more about that, is that the developer experience, but it's not very common yet. And it's an important part of the software development, because if the dev have a good experience in your environment, in your software creation process, the software, the final of the job will be good too. If the developer have a good tools, a good environment, a good support, this job will be better. And the GenAI tool can be supporting this, can be improving this process. The GenAI is not focused to solve all points, it's not a bullet point. Sorry, it's not a bullet point to solve all problems, but it's an important thing to improve the developer experience in day by day. And in the same time, it can be increase the developer's productivity, because using GenAI tools like a GitHub Copilot, for example, it's not necessary anymore for this developer make extensive researches on the internet about common tasks, because these tools already generate suggestions focused on these tasks. If I need, for example, to create a switch case in Java, and I not remember how can I do that, I don't need to go to the forums, I don't need to go to the Google, because this assistant already suggests to me. I need only to start to create this command, and I will be receive suggestions for this, or using a GitHub Copilot chat or other AI tool like a chat experience to have an answer about that. It's increased the productivity a lot. And it's not only this, but using to automate the documentation to support me to generate unit tests and other parts of this process. And it can be increase my learning. How? Using the same GenAI tools to supporting me to understanding other parts of this project, or to understand what this project does. Imagine that you are starting in a new project and you have no information about that. You can use GenAI tools to generate documentations, to generate explanations, to generate conversational documentations, to support you to understanding easier what this application does and how can you support this development team faster. Okay? And using all of this, we can focus on the really important part in the software development, in the business, because we don't need to focus anymore in the common tasks or in documenting or in create a simple pieces of code. We can focus on the more important part. We can focus in the really complex part of this process to understand the business rules, what you need to implement here in the detail to improve the application, to create a best applications, okay? And in general, how can these GenAI tools improve the software development, the DevOps workflows? We can talk a lot about a lot of points, but I have here 5 main points that we can use, because these points is the topics that I'm seeing in the clients, I'm seeing in my job recently, okay? And can be increase our productivity a lot. The first one is the code creation. It's the most common, using tools like a GitHub Copilot, because the GitHub Copilot, as I mentioned before, providing you code suggestions, code snippets, documentations, code explanations, support you in a code corrections, support you in a lot of tasks in the code creation process, okay? The next one is the code review. Why I'm talking about code review? Because, well, in general, it's very common, or I guess it's essentially, because all developers need to create a merge request or a pull request before merge the source code. And in general, in theory, the developers need to describe their changes to support the approval team to understanding if this change makes sense or have problems. And in general, the developers only describe merge to main or merging feature, and it's not a usable information, and the approval need to go to the source code, read line by line, what code does, if it makes sense or not. It's a boring process. It's a boring job to do. And using generative AI, we can use these tools to understand the change and provide a useful description for this pull request. Description, file by file, recommendations, vulnerability explanations, and I need to go only to the source code if I see something wrong in the code description, or I need to call to the developer to understand this change only if I see something wrong in the code description. It's a good point to productive gain. The next one is the documentation. The idea here is documenting your source code, because we know that we have in general two scenarios, one or the second. The first one is I don't have documentation because no one did this in the past. And the second one is, yes, I have documentation, but it's a very, very outdated documentation because someone created this in the first year of the project and no one updated this anymore. And it's a problem because in both cases, I have no documentations. And we can use generative AI tools to creating this. And you can automate in this process in a different parts of your software development lifecycle. You can use the IDE from developers to create this documentation. You can include this documentation process in a pull request, for example. You can have a scheduled process to create this documentation. And in the future, you can put this in a conversational chatbot to do more easier to interact with your documentation process and maintain this alive easier. The next one is the test generation, and here it's possible to create unit tests using generative AI, following company standards, following company frameworks, and a lot of other important rules. And we can create here too functional testing, a testing of interface using natural language. We don't need to create anymore HTML mappings, CSS mapping fields. We can use natural languages to creating this testing process. And all of them using generative AI, turning this job more easier. The next one is the code correction, because we know today we have a lot of vulnerability in the code, and we already use SaaS tools to generate a report for us about this. And Sonar, Fortify, other SaaS tools, other security tools provide us information, and we can use generative AI to use these informations to generate a correction for our codes and correct vulnerabilities, issues, code smells, bugs, and much more. And in the next, we can do much more than that. These 5 points are the most common that I'm seeing here, are most used that I'm seeing here today. But we can do this, for example, a creation of your backlog using generative AI, using describing the use case for a Gen AI tool to create your epics, your features, your user stories and tasks, for example. You can use this to do a reverse engineering in the source code, to support a legacy modernization. You can use this in a lot of different parts of your software development lifecycle to increase your productivity, okay? And day by day, new tools are born to support us in these parts. Okay, what tools I'm using at this moment? The first one is the most common, GitHub Copilot, because this tool is a very interesting, it's an amazing tool that supports developers in a lot of different tasks. The most common is using on my IDE to generate code suggestions to me, to generating to me code corrections, to generate to me how can I create testings and other important implementations. In general, using this tool to improve my implementations, for example. And the next one is GFT Impact, is a tool, interesting tool focused to support the entire software development lifecycle using Gen AI, and is focused to productive gain. And we have here features like backlog creation, story creation, documentation projects, test creation, code reviewing, code correction, code fixing, testing, legacy modernization. We have a different set of tools to use in GenAI to improve the productivity, okay? And I like to run a demo for you, a quick demo, 2 demos that I have here, using these GenAI tools to understand how can you using this in your days, okay? The first one, it's a more simple. I'm using directly on my IDE. Basically, imagine that you are starting a new project that you have no information, and you need to solve a vulnerability reported by a SaaS tools, document the code, and create a unit tests. Basically, I received this information. A Sonar print screen informing me that I have SQL injection in my class user.java. What I need to do here? Well, opening my IDE here, I have this project. It's a already opened project in the class. I can use here my GitHub Copilot. For example, asking this, explain me the code and show me a bullet list with all vulnerabilities to support me to understand if I have more vulnerabilities than the reported. And here I already received a lot of information. You can see here an explanation of this code, what code does, the fields that I have, constructor, methods, and here the vulnerabilities, the SQL injection, sensitive data exposure, improper exception. Basically, a lot of vulnerabilities here. What I can do here, I can request for GitHub Copilot to correct only the SQL injection or correct the others. And I will request here, correct all vulnerabilities on the codes. And here, the GitHub Copilot should be understanding this and create to me a new version of the source code with the vulnerabilities corrections here and a short summary of these changes. I can copy this, paste this here, and I have here a new version of the source code. And okay, now I need to do a next task, documenting this code. I can open here the Explorer, right-click on the user, and create a documentation. Basically here I need to create a prompt that I'm using, the language of this application, and the LLM that I plan to use. And I'm using the GFTI Impact here to generate a documentation in the company standards, and we need to personalize this based on what the company needs to explain the code. And here, basically, is generated the documentation. We can open this in a Markdown preview, and here we can see overview, process flow, insights, and data manipulation. To generate tests, basically is the same. You can create here a unit test, select a prompt, frameworks, the language, LLM, and we can include this in existing files if necessary. For example, if I'm creating a test for existing project and this project already have a unit test, we can add more testing for this, or improving the test, or correcting the test. Or if I don't have tests yet, I can create a new unit test for this project, okay? And here, basically, I have this new test class, and I can commit this file and follow my DevOps process. Okay? And for the next demo, the process will be the same, but I will be create this directly on my GitHub, following my DevOps pipeline. I will be update the code using GitHub Copilot on web, create a pull request, document, create a test, and review this pull request. Basically, I will be use in the same repository. It's a same vulnerable project repository. I will be click here on the Copilot section, and I will be describe a task. And I will request solve the SQL injection on user.java. and I will be start this task. Basically, the GitHub Copilot will be understanding my source code, my vulnerabilities, and will be propose a solution to correct this code. And I can here generate a plan. GitHub Copilot will be understanding the class and the steps, and I can click here to implement these files properly. And Copilot will be generate a correction for us. It's a very quick process. And here we can see the old version, the new version, include correction, the SQL injection, the parallel corrections, and I will be create a new pull request here to implement this change. And created, and I will be open my GitHub again. And here I have now a pull request. What happens here? In the beginning that I'm created this pull request, a pipeline will be triggered by GitHub Actions, and this pipeline will be trigger my GFTA impact to create to me a documentation, to create to me a unit test, and then create to me a reviewing process. It's not a long process, but we can see here the pipeline running to monitoring this. It's creating the testing for us for now. After that, we'll be saving on the pull request, and after that, the document will be documenting this project. And the interesting here is that we can guarantee that all the time that the developers create a new change, create a new pull request, we can maintain the documentation alive, and we can guarantee that the unit tests will be created automatically in your repository. For example, here, the test is already created. And here I have a new comment for the unit tests. And I need to wait for the documentation process. It's a wiki process too. And all of them, as I mentioned, documentation, testing, we can adapting this and creating a more specific scenario to generate for specific situations. We can create a specific documentation for COBOL projects or for .NET projects or for Java projects, and following different standards for each one here. I think that the documentation already generated too. Only waiting here. Okay, I have the tests and documents generated, and if I'm going here for the file changes, now I have first one, the user.java, the file changed by GitHub Copilot. And here I have the user test.java. I already have tests on my project for this class, and GFTA Impact understood this and only updated these tests, creating more tests if necessary, correcting tests or removing tests that was not necessary anymore. And in the end, created here a documentation. I didn't have documentation before, and for now, it creates a new version, but in the next pull request, it will be create only an updated version of this documentation. It's in Markdown file, and you can save in your repository or integrate in another tool that you are prefer to use. And let me go back here. And now, in the pull request, we have the code reviewer, and it's an interesting point because it provides for us information about the developer changes. It provides to me a description. It provides to me a summary explaining file by file what pull request does. And not only for the pull request for the file changes by GitHub Copilot or the developer, but for the files created by GFTA impacted tools. And here we have recommendations for this pull request and vulnerabilities explanation. And I can see here now, for example, that I have other vulnerabilities that I need to solve, and I can make a decision if I will be approved this or request the developer correct this other pull requests or no. Okay, Okay, I think that my time is down, is finished, and here is my contacts. You can see here my LinkedIn profile, my YouTube link again, and my email address if you like to talk with me. And I think it's now for today. Thank you for watching my talk today.